Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners zoning meeting for Thursday, April 27th, 2023. And we are coming to order. And can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Baxter. Here. Commissioner Bernard.
Here.
Commissioner Marino. Here. Vice Mayor Sachs. Here. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Commissioner Woodward. Here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to have our opening invocation and prayer, and it's going to be led by Commissioner Woodward this morning. Please rise if you're able.
Dear God, bless this meeting convened in goodwill for the benefit of those we serve. Give us the strength to overcome the obstacles we shall surely meet and the wisdom to make good use of the opportunities we shall surely find. Amen.
Amen. All right. Okay. And I see we've had our notice, correct? Thank you. Okay, good to know. And do we have proof of publication?
Yes.
All right, is there a motion to receive and file? We have a motion by Commissioner, everybody, Commissioner Bernard, and seconded by Commissioner Baxter. All in favor, all opposed, that motion carries 7-0. All right, next, to our county attorney for our swearing in.
All those wishing to testify or speak on today's items, please rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, are there any amendments to our agenda this morning?
We have one amendment related to item number 4, DOA CA 2021-1006, Shops at Indian, and it's a correction in the request that it's one type 1 restaurant that's part of the Class A with a drive-through.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? We have a motion by Commissioner Bernard, a second by Commissioner Baxter. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries 7-0. All right, moving on to our consent agenda this morning. Would anybody like to pull any items from consent?
No, Mayor, but we do have one card.
Okay, all right. Without any items being pulled, let's, I guess, start with disclosures. And we can start with Commissioner Baxter this morning.
For the consent item number 3, the Polo Gardens MUPD, I received an email which has been filed with the clerk. My office met with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan, and no site visit.
Thank you.
Oh, forgive me, one more. And item 4, I received an email and filed with the clerk, and I also had verbal communication with the same two again, Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On both item 3 and 4, for Polo Gardens and Shops at Indian Trails, I've met with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan, and no correspondence and no site visits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. On the consent agenda, on item number 4, I had verbal communications, phone conversation with Lauren McClellan, and I've received and filed the emails. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Marino.
Thank you, Mayor. On consent item agenda 3, I have verbal communications with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan. And on consent agenda item number 4, same verbal communications with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan, and I have filed correspondence.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. For Polo Gardens, item number 3, I have verbal communication with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan. And for item 4, Shops at Indian Trails, verbal communication with Jennifer Morton and Laura McClellan, and email correspondence that's filed.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For item number 3, Polo Gardens, I've had verbal communications with Lauren McClellan, no correspondence, no site visit. For item number 4, Shops at Indian Trails, verbal communications with Lauren McClellan. I've had 1 email received and no site visit for item number 4. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you very much. And for my own disclosure, on item number 2, the Shapiro property, my staff had verbal communications with Josh Nichols. On item number 3, Polo Gardens, I had verbal communications with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan. And on item number 4, Shops at Indian Trails, I had verbal communication with Jennifer Morton and Lauren McClellan, received emails, and those have been filed with the clerk. All right, with that out of the way, I guess we'll take our 1 comment card, and then we can bring it back to the board.
Ken Tuma, please.
For 3 minutes. Get it ready.
Thank you, Board. Ken Tuma. My address is 610 Clematis Street, West Palm Beach, and I've been sworn in. Thank you for having me here. We are in support of the Manahan project, but the reason why I'm up here today, just for a bit of personal deference, is to the agent of that application, Miss Colleen Walter, who's sitting right back there, and I can see she's really mad already. She will be walking out of this meeting and retiring after 37 years of doing entitlements and zoning in Palm Beach County. Colleen graduated from Cornell University and got a master's degree from FAU in urban planning. She's been a very important part of the planning fabric of Palm Beach County for many years. She joined Carrie Kildea, a name that some of you will know, in 1986. That Kildea and Associates later became Urban Design Studio, and she's been a principal in the firm as long as I can remember. She has been a part of our family. She has been an integral consultant in many of private, but most importantly, public projects here in the county. A lot of them you'll recognize and know. She was a significant team member, and I know the staff here will agree with that, for the North County District Park, for the departments of the airport, for the water utilities, Green K, Palm Beach State College, the Dennis Gellin campus, this expansion of the Solid Waste Authority waste to energy plant, Scripps project, the ballpark of the Palm Beaches. Colleen was an integral part of each one of those projects. When I asked Colleen what was her favorite project on Monday, she didn't know I was doing this, and I don't even want to look at her because I'm sure she's pretty mad. I asked her what was her most favorite project she worked on, and she really reflected on that for a second and said, earlier on in my career, I worked on all the projects in the acreage, all the parks in the acreage, and that was probably the most important thing, the most impactful thing that she has worked on her entire career. Colleen also has been involved in many committees across the state. She was a chairperson of the Florida Board of Landscape Architects. She's also a very important mentor for many people in our area. And I've got 53 seconds. She and her husband, Lindsay, many of you may know Lindsay, plan on traveling and enjoying their retirement. And I want to just personally thank her friendship for 37 years of being in front of this board. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Marino, you are recognized.
Colleen, you knew I had to pipe in. I think I've known Colleen since the early 2000s, and I have found her to be wonderful, friendly, compassionate, well-spoken, knowledgeable, and you're going to be missed. And, you know, anytime you want to go on a kayak, I'll give it a try. But you will be missed, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you so much. Mayor Weiss, Commissioners, Colleen Welter with Urban Design. It has been my pleasure to have had the opportunity to work here in Palm Beach County for as long as I have, and also to work for Palm Beach County on many projects. I thought Ken actually just came this morning to make sure that I showed up, but thank you very much. It has also been my pleasure over the years to work with both Carrie Kildea and Ken and many other attorneys, planners, architects, engineers, elected officials, you know, in Palm Beach County and the other municipalities, all of whom I have learned something from, taken something away, and that will, you know, stay with me for the rest of my life. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Rudder, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, just wanted to echo Ken's words. And on behalf of staff, for those of us who've worked with Colleen for decades, unfortunately to say, some of us, thank you very much. Your professionalism, your interaction, all the time, effort, diligence, much appreciated. We wish you the best in retirement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here this morning. Thank you for the service you've not only provided to your employer and your partner, but to our county and our community, and the difference that you've made, not only with your work, but just what you've done for our community, because it will be there for many, many years after we're all gone. And so to know that you've had that kind of an impact in a positive way is something you can carry with you in your next chapter, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome. All right. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? We have a motion by Commissioner Marino, a second by the Vice Mayor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, that motion carries 7-0. So we are on to item number 5 now. And this will be staff's public notice and, what is it, permission to advertise.
Yes, so item number 5 is a request for permission to advertise. We're proposing amendments to the Unified Land Development Code as it relates to public notice and postponements. We have a bulleted list there on the agenda, what it is summarizing, but ultimately it's to modify requirements for certified mail, to switch it to first-class mail, references in the newspaper, and just refer to public notices by Florida statute. We are amending our postponement by right deadline to coincide with our printing so that people from the public know exactly what's going to be postponed when our packet is printed. And that is a general summary for consistency on public notice and postponements.
All right. Thank you. Would somebody like?
I will make a motion to approve. A motion for permission to advertise.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Marino, and we have a second by the Vice Mayor for permission to advertise. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, that motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item number 6.
Okay. Item number 6 is also a request for permission to advertise. This is an amendment, a residential follow-up amendment, and some amendments to prior ordinances that we had done. Again, there's a bulleted list here in our agenda, but ultimately, we had some remaining language in the code relative to electronic changeable copy that we want to delete as it conflicts with our new code that we adopted. We're providing some clarification on language on lots that are in the AR district, where we inadvertently left out setbacks that were previously in there, and to add them back in, and to remove a prohibition of accessory structures in side yards.
All right. Any questions from staff on this? If not, we'll take a motion. This would again be to advertise.
I'll make a motion to advertise.
Okay, of course.
The last part you said, so a prohibition on accessory structures and side yards?
There's currently a prohibition.
And so we're
We're taking out the prohibition.
I misheard, thank you.
Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Marino, a second by the Vice Mayor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, all opposed, that motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item number 7.
Okay. Item number 7 is a new proposal for request for permission to advertise. We've met with several golf course owners, and we're looking to establish employee housing, and it's a type of quarter that we have. It won't be related to density, but is to allow golf course clubhouses to build employee housing on their property. It has to be accessory to the golf course in the recreation area. It gives an alternative living space for these. We've established language in there to make it a livable home for these residents while they're here on visa, working in our golf course areas. We're also looking to remove language for kitchen removals, for accessory structures. We have this recorded requirement that we want to eliminate. And then we're also modifying accessory living quarters for internal consistency. So we're very pleased to establish this new type of housing. And all three of these amendments will actually be going to LDRAB in May, and then we'll be back to you at the end of May and first reading. And this particular amendment will require 2 motions.
Okay.
And one thing, if I may add, part of the concepts before the board over the past several months have been density, 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 and this proposal, we're hoping will provide another tool in the toolkit, and it will reduce some of the pressure on livable year-round units throughout the county for this type of temporary housing, essentially temporary workers. So we're thinking this is another strategy for all the other ones that we've had before the board.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Marino, you recognize.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank staff for working on this. I know that when the folks from Jonathan's Landing approached me several months ago about this, there's a lot of talk about housing and density and carbon footprint, and with Jonathan's Landing, it's a perfect example. They have the pod right outside their door. Right now, all of the workers that they have are in other units all over the county, in the north end of the county, so that will actually be freeing up those units for more rentals. And it will also, because it's right outside the gate, the carbon footprint is smaller. They run a shuttle that picks everybody up at all of the different units, so now it just has to go to one place. And I know there's, I met with other clubs yesterday in the north end of the county that are looking to do the same thing. And I think what will happen is you might see several clubs like Boca West. I know the Boca West is doing this too, talking to other clubs down south, trying to coordinate their efforts. And I know that there are a lot of people that are looking for housing on a temporary basis. And those clubs actually pay on an annual basis when they rent apartments. So it's a benefit for all concerned, not just the visaed workers who are here, who are coming here temporarily, but for the folks that are looking for year-round housing in the units that will be given up by those workers. So I do appreciate staff for all you've done to work with me and work with the community on this. And with that, I will make a motion, the 2 motions, to approve staff recommendation 7A and to approve the permission to advertise pursuant to staff recommendation 7B.
Do we need to do them separately, or can we do them concurrently?
Yeah, I think for the clerk's sake, separately might be cleaner.
Okay, so we'll take, and so we have a motion on item to approve.
I will amend my motion, so we will do them separately. The motion to approve staff recommendation 7A.
Okay, and so we have a motion by Commissioner Marino. Do we have a second? We have a second by the Vice Mayor, and we still have comment by Commissioner Woodward.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would echo much of what you just said. Boca West also approached me about this, and just so everyone is aware, they bring in a lot of workers from out of country on hospitality visas, work visas that are coming here. And I know for them, they're even having a lot in Broward County where they're having to bus them from different places. And I think this would ease a lot of what we're trying to work towards. And thank you so much for putting this together. I know several clubs are excited about this, and I think many more will probably jump on it too. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, is there any further discussion or comment on this? Seeing none, we have a motion by Commissioner Marino, a second by the Vice Mayor. This is to approve staff recommendation on 7A. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries 7.
Okay, and I will follow up with the motion to approve the permission to advertise pursuant to staff recommendation 7B.
We have a motion by Commissioner Marino, a second by the Vice Mayor. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Okay. Moving on to PZ&B department items. Item number 8, this is code enforcement overview and commercial vehicles.
Mayor, if I could, a quick introduction. This is essentially a continuation of our discussion we began with you in March, which followed direction from the board in January. Certainly heard from a number of folks related to commercial vehicle parking and challenges in the area. heard that direction in January. We began the discussion with you in March, and it was occurring in three parts. One addressed the concerns on code division, code practices, and we reported to you on that. Completed that portion of the presentation, and I will follow up with the county administrator had made clear on her direction to look into body cameras, the utilization with code enforcement. We have begun that and begun those discussions, and we will update you as we move down the line and have those ready to come online. So we completed that portion of the presentation. We began the presentation on just a code enforcement division overview, got about halfway through. We'd like to complete that this morning and then move lastly into the zoning division. Quick presentation on commercial vehicles, where our code stands, and any direction the board may have on modifications to that. So, Mayor, that's where we stand at the moment, and Michelle Pagan, our code enforcement director, is prepared to wrap up her portion of the presentation.
And I understand County Administrator is here virtually with us?
Correct. The county administrator is with us on WebEx. I will text her to make sure. I know the link is open and we tested it, and I will confirm with her that she is online. But
Okay. All right. With that, let's, we can begin.
Good morning. Michelle Pagan, Director of Code Enforcement. Thank you for this opportunity to...
Can you get your microphone a little closer so we can hear you? There you go.
Good morning. How's that?
Much
Better?
I'm getting old.
I have a loud voice. Just to briefly recap on what we had discussed in our previous meeting, I'll just explain. To repeat, our vision is to maintain our neighborhoods and communities' quality of life, to enforce land development regulations and county ordinances in a timely and equitable manner, to serve the public professionally with integrity and respect. We currently have 36 code officers that are divided into 5 teams. Each team comprises of 6 code officers with 1 senior code officer. Our organizational structure is important to understand because as it highlights the continuous process of review on all cases that we receive. Our code enforcement officers are highly trained individuals that go through a continuous training program. As long as they're hired as a code officer, they will receive continuous training. They are also certified by FACE, and FACE training is the Florida Association of Code Enforcement, which also has an additional enhanced training requirement every year, and every 2 years they're required. Our policies and procedures are constantly and always being evaluated for efficiencies and also to maintain their relevancy. Upon receipt of a complaint, the first thing we do is validate the complaint. We then go through our policies and procedures to make sure that we're doing so appropriately. And then, of course, the due process, the proper service, and reasonable time, all part of our processes, are to benefit the customer and our division's efficiencies. One of the efficiencies that we identified in 2021, my predecessor, was the response times. Once they evaluated the code enforcement response times and the intake process and procedures, they determined that there were areas that they can improve on that could be done better. In 2021, the reduction in response times went from 10 to 3 business days. Currently, I'm proud to say that in 2022 and 2023, our current division average is less than 2 days. Our life safety violations require a 24-hour response. Currently, there are the same-day response and/or coordination, and I'll explain further on that in the coordination. In 2018, as well, our bar graph is on there. It's divided by teams, and those were the average response times. 16-day average in 2018. In 2023, as I said, I'm proud to say we have a 1-day or less response time.
Good morning, Mayor Weiss, County Commissioners. Rick Torrance, I'm the Code Enforcement Manager. What we do, we investigate and enforce civil, non-criminal code violations in unincorporated Palm Beach County. This is broken down into 6 major categories to include the Florida Building Code, Housing and Property Maintenance Code, Unified Land Development Code, Florida Fire Prevention Code, Palm Beach County Code of Ordinances. We work with ERM, Solid Waste, and Land Development on those codes of ordinances. We investigate business tax receipts. Examples would be use violations, parking enforcement, curb stoning, property maintenance, foreclosure registry, illegal water use, special permits and events, marine violations, COVID task force, business tax receipts, and occupancy uses. We work with people to achieve voluntary compliance. Code enforcement is more than just getting people to cut their grass. Common types of investigation include use violations, commercial use in residential properties, setback issues, hours of operation. Restaurants turning into nightclubs after 11 p.m. is a big issue that we deal with on a continuing basis. Farm animals and the urban tier. Unpermitted construction hours. Construction is not allowed between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. No construction on Sundays. That's another complaint that we get a lot. Noise violations. We investigate adult entertainment complaints, human trafficking, temporary use permits for food trucks, fireworks tents, Christmas tree tents. We check the tents to make sure they're fire resistant and they have all the permits in place. Temporary signs, illegal, unpermitted signs. You'll see the signs in the easements. That's something that we address. We pick those up, and the ones that are redundant, we try to locate the person placing the signs and address that in a different manner. Commercial vehicle enforcement, improperly parked boats and trailers. Common code violations would include site plan violations or misuse of property, expired permits, unpermitted structures, exterior, interior disrepair renovations, minimum housing standards, fire codes. We enforce fire code when the fire inspector has trouble with voluntary compliance, pool water maintenance, water clarity, life safety barriers on swimming pools, inoperative unlicensed derelict vehicles, dead trees, overgrown vegetation, landscape requirements, trash debris, again, business tax receipts, and occupancy use. Another one we come across frequently is multifamily in a single family zoning district. Who do we work with? We work with the county administrator's office, county attorney's office, PZMB divisions, PBSO, fire rescue, public works, animal control, public safety, land development, community services, Florida Department of Health, Solid Waste Authority, Lake Worth Drainage District, Indian ITID, OCR, ERM, the Inspector General, OFMB, the tax collector, and ATF.
A picture speaks 1,000 words, so we have a collection of actual cases that our code officers have gone out and investigated. We're more than just grass, as we've said before, and common complaints we receive are properties that appear to be neglected. The code enforcement officers attempt contact with the property owners to determine what is the situation, what is the cause of why the properties are in such condition. Pool clarity. Neglected green pools are a very common one. They pose a health risk as the mosquitoes and other disease-carrying insects are in the area. The one to the next to it is the grass. That's another common complaint that we received. Property maintenance, the substandard housing and the structures. What appear to be a homeless camp actually was a rental property behind someone else's home. Multifamily rental properties. We come across those quite often where we see areas that are neglected, such as in this photo right here, the fence in disrepair, the clothesline corroded with sharp edges, the boat bimini top broken and the pipes sticking out, which cause hazards to where the children were playing, the boards and the nails, and all of these are hazards that we address. Property maintenance also includes the parking complaints that we receive, and it's more than just a vehicle that's parked on the side of the road. Here we have, in residential urban areas, cars that are overflowing on the property where it should be only 1 or 2 vehicles that are allowed on that in the driveway that can accommodate. You see 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 7 vehicles, and they're parked on the green grass, on the swales, blocking the sidewalks. There we have a recreational vehicle that poses a hazard. Why? Because it's lifted, elevated, and opened on homemade wooden lifts and levelers. It's blocking the sidewalk, which of course is against Florida State Statute 316.1945. The bottom one, as you see on this photo, has several vehicles. This was a complaint that we received. Every time we would receive it, it was always for early morning or in the evening hours when everyone was home, the children were playing outside. The complaint here was that these vehicles were parking the resident was parking excessive amounts of vehicles on the grass and also in the cul-de-sac area. Here, so we went out at 7:59 in the morning, and there we saw the violations. And going to the next one, openly stored trash and debris. This is another common one we have. Here we have them in the carports, and to the left is a mobile park home where there was numerous trash cans and storage-covered tarps, boxes throughout, and unlicensed registered vehicles. When we made contact with the homeowner was not there all the time. They would leave the state and come back. They were seasonal tenants. The vehicles were registered. We made contact with them. They just would remove the license plate off their vehicles. So that's why we make contact with homeowners. There's always more than one story to it. The trash, they identified, and they did remove it. To the right, we see another income property in which the tenants there had trash outside and about. They were also using that area as a maintenance and unlicensed garage, basically, to repair motorcycles. So there we have issues with the fluids, the gas, the oils all over, and you can see that in the driveway and the unimproved surfaces. This story right here, when you look at it, was in a gated community. It's a beautiful looking home. Nothing that would immediately draw your eye to any complaints, did not see any obvious violations. Upon our arrival there, this was a complaint received by a county commissioner and then was forwarded to code enforcement. Upon our arrival, the garage door was open, and I was approached by a neighbor who asked, oh, was I there for the smell and the mold coming out of the garage and for the broken garage door? I said I did not know what he was talking about, and he said the garage door has been broken for quite some time. And I said, okay, thank you very much. So I walked up. The homeowner was standing outside it, and as we discussed about the garage door, and he did explain the garage door, in fact, was broken. Inside, we observed several other things that were of concern to us: trash, mold building up along the walls, and obvious signs of a flood. Exterior and disrepair. Absentee owners. On the left, you will see this structure right there. The owner was simply trying to sell the property, but you cannot leave properties in such disrepair and cause hazards and attractive nuisances, which then we partner with Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, because this property that was neglected was also a structure that people were committing crimes inside. The central pictures there are residents inside our urban area. It's inside of a gated community. The property owner has neglected this property in such state that there are holes in the roof. The fence is in disrepair and falling down, causing hazards to their neighbors. In addition to the rear of the property, which is the bottom right-hand photo, you will see that there is a fence there and a pool that's in such a state of neglect and disrepair with the green algae.
Here we have exterior disrepair. The picture on the left depicts a common problem we find in the Century Village community. The older buildings built in the 60s and 70s are experiencing what's called concrete spalling, where moisture gets into the cement, it gets to the rebar rusts and swells up, causing chipping into the cement portion. In this case, it's a walkway or a balcony on the second floor. These are things that we need to look at and typically get an engineer involved with to make sure there's no life safety issues, to make sure it's repairable. We would then work with the homeowners association to hire the appropriate parties that can go in there and make the repairs on that. The picture on the right is termite damage, rotten wood, basically exterior disrepair. If left unchecked and unrepaired, it would continually get worse. This is another common problem we come across in Century Village. Residents will buy a unit inside, and everyone wants an open floor plan now, so they remove the walls in the kitchen. Unfortunately, a lot of these walls are load-bearing walls. They hire unlicensed contractors. We're currently working with Century Village to educate them. We had a HOA meeting in there recently where we talked to the residents about some of the things and issues that we're finding in there. In this case, the load-bearing wall was removed, and the unit owned by a different party above it basically had a trampoline in their living room. So we got engineers involved. We had the ceiling shored up with the jacks that you see in the picture. But it's a common problem. It could be a life safety issue. On the right is a typical someone replacing a door and door frame and doing some stucco work without a permit. You are allowed to replace the door without a permit, but when you go into the door frame and compromise the wall of the exterior, that does require a permit. This was a drainage investigation out in Jupiter Farms. This was along Mellon Avenue, which is a county right-of-way, county-controlled drainage easement. The homeowner didn't like to mow the grass there because it was always flooded with water, so he took it upon himself to bring in fill and fill the county swale so it was more aesthetically pleasing, and he was able to mow the grass in the area. Unfortunately, the property on the right is his neighbor, so that caused water to now back up in his swale even worse than it would have been if the swale would have been left untouched. That's something that we get involved with Road and Bridge on to help rectify the issue. Next, we have Unified Land Development investigations. The picture on the left is a beautiful nursery that was working and operating as a nursery. The property sold. Someone moved in, pulled out all the growing fields, and opened a contractor storage yard. This is a combination of contractor storage, landscape service, but you can see that the agricultural element completely went away, and it's now something that should be located in an industrial area. So this is a before and after photo of that. Also on the right is another property in Heritage Farms. This was an egregious landscape service operation in there where there was no agriculture on the property. In the back you see chipping and mulching, which belongs in an industrial area. In the front you have the business part where there's parking of employee vehicles and landscape equipment. There was no agricultural use on this property. They turned it into an industrial use. The next slide is another similar issue that we come across. This happened to be a dredging company. The gentleman that owns this property in the agricultural residential area had his house on there, but he also had his dredging company located on the property. He slowly proceeded to fill that lake that you see in the picture with, I guess, resources that he was able to obtain with his dredging operations. We worked with him and we got it pretty much cleared out, which is depicted in the bottom picture, where he moved all his industrial equipment off the site. You all may remember the famous lake case. There were some gentlemen that met with zoning to talk to them about acquiring some land to build a ski lake. They basically were ski enthusiasts, professional level, and they wanted to build a ski lake, for them and their friends and whoever to come out and ski in a professional lake. They met with zoning. They were denied the approval to have that done. So they went about purchasing up plots of land around the area. And the picture on the right depicts what the result was. Even after we were involved throughout this process, we placed red tags, stop work orders on the property, and worked with them, and they didn't listen, and they just went ahead and built the ski lake. They finally had an attorney involved, where somehow they got an agricultural classification for a fish farm, although all the fish farm experts we talked to advised that this would no way support a fish farm. So that's where it currently stands. We constantly monitor this property to make sure there's no skiing going on, and we want it to appear to be agricultural. Unified Land Development Code investigations. This is commercial parking, typically out in the acreage area. I believe all these pictures were taken out in the acreage. The top little photo is just basically a truck parking lot. There's a house there, but it's basically a truck parking lot. The picture below that is a towing and storage yard out in the residentially zoned AR. The picture on the right is, the far right one is kind of shocking to me because it looks like a train depot. If you see the semi-trailers lined up and the semi-trailers in the back of the property, you know, that's typically what you would see in what it looks like in a train depot. I mean, this is a full-blown truck yard going on out there. And the picture in the top right is also a gentleman that we worked with. I worked with him years ago, got him to clear that up, and then a couple of years after we left, it was right back the way it started. He basically owns a towing company, and he doesn't, you know, pay taxes and buy a industrial zone piece of property, so he brings everything back to his house, and it impacts his neighbors. This is more of the same. The pictures on the left depict what we believe to be a defunct chauffeur company. You can see the transport buses, the semi-tractor trailer. They're all covered with overgrown vegetation. They're all moldy. They're just sitting there, rusting away. A couple of old Hummer limousines that are just parked there, haven't moved in years. And on the right is an aerial picture of that same property where you can see the vehicles scattered throughout the property. This decreases adjacent property values, and it's something that we look into getting cleaned up.
This photo depicts a mobile auto repair business owner's personal property and the view from his neighbor. On the left-hand side, that photo, it appears to be a house that is on fire, but actually it's not. It's the burning of the trash and supplies from his mobile auto repair. This individual was living next to that to the extent that they complained that the fumes were so toxic that they contacted the fire rescue department. Palm Beach County Fire Rescue responded, but by that time the fire was out. The odor had dissipated. They could not turn on their air conditioning because obviously the fumes from this would then go into their home through the AC. So this was we were successful in that we communicated with him. Solid Waste Authority, we partnered with all of our other entities within the county and provided him with education. He was a new resident, didn't know what to do. This was a new property. He had lost his business, and he explained to us. Did not make the violations okay, but we educated him, and he was given some resources to operate his business legally. The life safety issue that you see here was a case in which there was, again, substandard housing, illegal rentals. As you see, there's a boat that was being used as a home. There were illegal electrical wiring throughout. There was issues and concerns in regards to waste, where they were disposing of it. After, this is a successful picture on the right-hand side of once it was cleared out. We partnered with various other entities within Palm Beach County to assist with housing, food. All of these individuals were not just told they had to leave. We partnered with them. As a former crisis intervention officer, I take this seriously and passionately. We just don't push paper. We make sure we know, we understand that we're dealing with individuals and their lives. And these life safety issues are very important and critical to what we do as code enforcement officers. The next one right here is a life safety issue that was the most recent, and this was on a second-story balcony. As you see, we received this call from the daughter who said, my mother's apartment is being renovated. The condominium has hired an outside entity to come in and replace the railings. They have left my mother with no railings on her patio. Our officers went over there, obtained photos, and confirmed the violation did exist. We had to communicate. There was banter back and forth between the homeowners association and the contractor, both of who did not want to take responsibility. Well, they needed to take responsibility, and that was then secured. We partnered again with contractor certification, with our building department, and we were successful in getting that property secured, the hazard addressed, and homeowners association also took responsibility. The next picture right here is the life safety. Again, as a former crisis intervention officer, I take these personally and passionately because I understand that we're dealing with individuals, and during their times of crisis, we have to identify and respect and provide them with some type of dignity. These are, again, individuals. This property right here was the one from the very beginning where the neighbor came up to me and asked me if I was addressing the concern about the garage door. The garage door was the least of our issues and concerns at that point once we walked inside. This was a professional individual who just needed help. He was in a time of crisis and needed help. And that is what we did. We partnered with various other agencies within the county and were successful in getting him temporary housing, connected him with his house of worship of where his faith was, and also with family members that had no idea because they simply had not been inside the house for several years. Plumbing connections burst, which then caused a massive failure, structural failure of the inside of the walls and everything like that. They had no running water, no electricity in that residence. The final life safety photo that I'm showing you is a well-known case. It's the Joe Lewis properties that are out in Belle Glade. The tenaciousness of one of our former code officers, who's now a fire inspector, was passionate about these properties and maintained a good working communication with the tenants there. It was challenging in that we could not gain access into these apartments because the tenants were in fear of retaliation by their property owner, by the landlord. Once we did obtain permission to go into one of the units, other tenants allowed us into theirs as well. Coordinated effort, we partnered with several different agencies. We went into the apartments, obtained evidence of all the violations, one of which on the bottom right-hand side is the plumbing failure, the massive failure in that the waste products were backing up into the showers and into the kitchens. The center picture are ceilings that had completely collapsed. The structure itself, the integrity of the structure itself was compromised. The electrical panels were all exposed. And we were successful in that we were able to partner and get housing, temporary housing for several of the remaining tenants that were there. That property now is completely secured with fencing that we put around it, and we're in the process of possibly demolishing that property. It is beyond the state of rehabilitation.
This is our compliance flow chart. Upon receiving a complaint or self-initiated by a code enforcement officer, the code officer responds to the complaint within 1 to 3 business days to validate the violation. We contact the respondent at that point and discuss and educate and come up with a plan to come into compliance. If the violations are validated, the respondent is advised and a notice of violation is issued. If there's no valid violation, the complaint is closed at that point with nothing further. If it's a life safety violation, we respond within 24 hours, and we do the same process of attempting contact with the respondent and issuing a notice of violation requiring immediate action and compliance. We then do a reinspection process after the notice of violation is issued and a compliance time has passed. Hopefully, at that point, we come into voluntary compliance. We currently have a 75, almost 75% voluntary compliance rate. At that point, the case is closed. If for some reason the respondent was unable to come into compliance, we do issue a notice of hearing. Typically, that goes out 4 to 5 to 6 months after the initial contact with the respondent. That's all additional compliance time for the respondent. They are then scheduled for a special magistrate hearing. And after that 4 or 5, 6 months has passed, the hearing comes up. It's an independent magistrate who hears the code officer present the evidence. He also allows the respondent to present any of their evidence. If they are found in violation by the magistrate gives additional compliance time. Currently, for building permit issues that we do take to the magistrate hearing, we're aware of the building department's lengthy process, so we will recommend 9 months to a year to come into compliance with those building permit issues. If the respondent comes into compliance at any time during that time period, the case is closed. After the 9 months to a year, the code officer continually works with the respondent. We help them through the permit process the best we can, even though it's outside of our division. We help them with any zoning issues that they may have come across, even though it's outside our division. We do as much hold handing as we can to help these respondents come into compliance. If for some reason they do not come into compliance and the violations are not corrected after the extended period of compliance time, daily fines do begin to accrue. The case is processed by our in-house staff who check ownership to make sure ownership is correct, to make sure we have proper service on the case, to make sure Florida State Statute 162 is followed. And if compliance still goes unachieved, eventually a lien will be filed with the Office of Financial Management and Budget. Our goal is to close the case with voluntary compliance, and we go above and beyond in working with the respondents to help them as much as we can to come into voluntary compliance. There is never a point of no return.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Richard Senna from the County Attorney's Office. I'm going to be briefly discussing Chapter 162 of the Florida Statutes. Code enforcement follows Chapter 162 when enforcing county codes and ordinances. Chapter 162 ensures that respondents receive proper due process when the county enforces code violations, which includes notice and the opportunity to be heard. Respondents are given the ability to cure a violation in a reasonable period of time unless there is a repeat violation, a life safety issue, or the violation is irreparable or irreversible in nature. A special magistrate ultimately determines if there is a violation and provides a reasonable period of time to correct before a fine is imposed. For complex violations like a Class A conditional use, a respondent may be given 9 months. For simpler violations like cutting grass or clearing debris, a respondent may be given 30 days. If a violation is not corrected in time, daily fines accrue until compliance is achieved. Code enforcement then issues an affidavit of noncompliance to the respondent, and the respondent has 20 days to request a hearing to contest the imposition of fine and address the status of the violation, amount of fine, and recording of the lien. And of course, homesteaded properties cannot be foreclosed on.
This is a little more in-depth of our case development. Upon the initiation of a case, the complaint is received or self-initiated by the code enforcement officer. Preliminary research prior to any site visit would be to check the property appraiser's office, to check the deed, to check the aerial, to check the building records before any inspection is done. We then conduct a comprehensive site inspection to validate the complaint. Contact with the respondent is attempted, cards are left, information is left. We take photographs of the property. We then return and do additional research as far as ownership verification, building and zoning record search. If violations are verified, we issue a notice of violation after attempted contact and give it initially 30 days to comply. This is to establish communication and to ensure service. CEOs check for certified service after initial 30-day period. They do another site visit at that point, attempt contact, check for voluntary compliance at that point. If they do find voluntary compliance, they'll close the case. If the certified service is there, if the certified service is not valid at that point, the code enforcement officer will again send the notice out certified mail, but they'll also print a notice out and take it out to the respondent. If the respondent is not there at that time, the CEO will post the notice of violation on the property, then giving an additional 30 days to compliance, to come into compliance or make contact with the code enforcement officer. We post the property in the courthouse and close any corrected violations at any point that we find out that they've come into compliance for those violations. After the compliance date expires, if the respondent communicates or requests additional time in order to comply, the CEO has the ability to grant an extension at that point because we know that they're attempting to have voluntary compliance, and that's something that we look for. Reinspection and additional research is conducted to verify if the violation continues to exist. We make sure that there's been no transfer of the property that's the current owner at the time, and we hope to have voluntary compliance by that time and close the case. Violations not into compliance at that point A notice of hearing would be issued and sent via certified mail similar to the notice of violation. The CEO checks for certified service 10 days prior to the hearing. If the case does not have certified service, the code enforcement officer prints a copy of the notice of hearing and attempts contact at the respondent's address at that point. Another attempt at contact and communication. Sometimes people just ghost us, and we can't control that. We'll knock on the door and we see them peeping out the vertical blinds and they don't answer the door. And, we try to work with them, but that's their prerogative if they don't want to talk to us. The CEO then presents the case to a special magistrate. We currently have 7 or 8 magistrates that we have on a rotated basis. They're all approved by the Board of County Commissioners. The respondent, if present, has the opportunity to speak on the case. Once all facts are presented, the magistrate validates the violation and determines a new compliance date if the violations are validated. And as I said, for permit issues, which is typically what most things are, typically easily corrected violations will get corrected prior to this stage. We'll give an additional 9 months to a year to come into compliance. And again, we work with the respondent with any help they need with building or zoning issues. The CEO will then re-inspect the property and obtain updated photographs. If the violations are corrected, the CEO will issue what we call an affidavit of compliance. We send a copy of that notice to the respondent, and the case is closed at that point with no further action needed by the respondent. The case will close without any fines due. Violations not in compliance, an affidavit of noncompliance is issued, and a daily fine begins to accrue. Fines will range from $25 a day up to $500 a day based on the egregiousness of the violation. If it's just grass and junk, it would be $50 a day. If it's total illegal misuse of the property, like some of the pictures we showed previously, that could be $250 to $500 a day, and then that amount and higher for life safety violations. That's why you guys hear testimony from the public about these fines. Well, that's the reason the fines are different. On the day, if the violations are corrected, the CEO will issue affidavit of compliance to close the case. Violations, the fines begin to accrue. The respondent has 20 days after receiving the affidavit of noncompliance to request, again, another hearing to come in to contest the imposition of fine or lien on the property. If no response is received, the lien proceeds with the process. We have an in-house research specialist that's very good. She audits the cases once it's at this stage to make sure there's no change in ownership, all appropriate documentation is attached to the case, and procedures were followed. The CEO does one final inspection, again, to verify noncompliance to us filing the lead. We want to give the respondent every opportunity to come into compliance voluntarily, even if they don't contact us. We do one final site visit to make sure that the violation remains. And if the violation does remain, the lien is recorded and forwarded to the Office of Finance, Management, and Budget. The next slide is our code enforcement module, our interface, if you will. You all should have access to this interface to view the documentation in our files. We have total transparency. You can go in there and read the case notes. You can look at the photographs. You can see whether we contacted the respondents, what the communication involved with the respondents. And if any of the new commissioners don't know how to use this, I'd be happy to meet with each and every one of you or your aides to go over that, because again, we have full transparency. If a respondent is calling to you, complaining about code enforcement, I want you to be able to look at the case to see what we see.
The following two are going to be two case examples of actual cases that we dealt with, one of which concluded within days, and the second took years. The reason why I selected these two, because these two cases are the perfect examples of communication with the code enforcement officers and with the respondents. The first one began on March 6, 2023 for mechanical work in the driveway. A 5-day letter was issued because the person was not there. The code enforcement officer responded to the property, could not make contact with the homeowner, did not have a valid phone number or anything like that. So they left a 5-day letter warning them of the openly stored trash and the violation of the debris, inoperative, unlicensed vehicle. By the 16th, There was contact with the property owner, who advised that the vehicle with the no tag and the property was already cleaned up. They called again a second time on that day to speak also with the tenant, who the tenant also acknowledged that they cleaned up the property. By the 18th, the notice of violation for both of the violations that were noted were already cleared. The next one began on January 13th, 2009, and these are abbreviated notes from an actual case. The case began on, again, January 13th, 2019, with a self-initiated inspection of the area where they noticed a 6-foot wood fence in disrepair. The notice of violation was issued. I'm going to quickly go through. On March 23rd of 2009, the house was re-inspected for the third time. The fence had not been repaired. A notice of violation had been issued. Communication had been left at the property. On the 25th, re-inspected again. On the 31st, re-inspected again. The violation existed for the entire 3 months. No change. May of 2009, again re-inspected. In between there, as Mr. Torrance had explained, we've had a lot of communication by certified mail, by postings, by door hangers. Still no communication from the homeowner or the tenant. We then go to 2010. We re-inspected, still no change. The wood fence was still in disrepair. Mind you, this is a rental income property of which was occupied. On March 4th, 2022, the homeowner walked into the Palm Beach County Code Enforcement Office regarding the case and wanting to know how they can clear up their fines. They claimed they had no knowledge of the fines. They had no knowledge of the violations or anything like that. The importance of communication and documentation showed that we actually had, in fact, communicated at one time with the tenant, who then put the homeowner, the property owner, on the phone. They, in fact, did know. We had communicated several times with the tenant. We also obtained the property owner's home address, and we posted and sent letters to their property there as well. So again, back to March 4th, 2022, they walked in. By the 10th, they met with the code enforcement officer, who verified that the violation was corrected, cited the violation, made sure it checked everything. By the 17th, affidavit of compliance was recorded. By March 28th, OFMB was in the process of preparing the agenda, and they agreed to a settlement in regards to that property for $19,000, which was 5% of the total amount due by that time. May 3rd, 2022 was scheduled in regards to that settlement here at the BCC meeting. By July 1st, 2022, all was concluded, all the fines were paid, and the case was closed. That shows how quickly the process of identifying the violation with a homeowner or a property owner or a tenant in communication with code enforcement, and how quickly something can be resolved if addressed properly.
In 2022, code enforcement investigated almost 8,000 complaints. We issued a total of 4,470 notices of violation, meaning half the complaints were not unable to be validated. 77% of those cases closed in compliance, voluntary compliance, prior to any magistrate hearing. 23% of the cases required the special magistrate hearings. 6% of adjudicated cases that went into fine received a significant fine reduction at a modification hearing. Now, these numbers are revolving, so we can only look from year to year, but cases in 2022 will result actually in 2023 or sometimes thereafter. So this is the only way we could run the numbers, but it does show a very good number for voluntary compliance by working with the respondents. And again, compliance is our goal. Emphasis is on voluntary compliance, a significant focus on education and engagement with the public in an effort to resolve complaints without having to pursue the time-consuming special magistrate process. Circumstances affecting timely resolution, and this is something that we come across day in, day out. Non-compliant, communicative respondents, seasonal residents, access issues, inspection warrants, zoning and building permitting process, personal economic circumstances. We come across mental health, we come across poverty, we come across, just people that don't have the resources to do what we need them to do, and we work with them as best we can. We've had code officers deliver gas for their lawnmower. We've had code officers pick grocery carts that are in their front yard because they have no means to return the grocery cart. We picked up tires on the side of the road because the resident can't do it himself. There are things that we do on a continuing basis to help people come into compliance. Lack of legal service of any required notice. We're then required to post the notice as previously discussed. Additional research is always required. There's properties that go into probate. There's properties that have development orders, etc. At each time we attempt contact, or we're unable to attempt contact, we'll leave a card, we'll leave education material on the door, and we always encourage them to reach out to us to help them through the process.
In addition to ensuring our code enforcement division's ongoing education and training, we take the initiative, as Mr. Torrance stated, to educate the public. Awareness through attending homeowners association meetings. We attend public civic organization events. We recently partnered with an organization to educate new homeowners, new tenants, about their responsibilities and how to communicate when there are violations or when there's issues that are of concern, that they need to contact the property management as opposed to directly to code enforcement. Give the property management the opportunity to address the issue first. We do this by going, like I said, to county-sponsored events, business, community relations meetings. We coordinate and participate in community programs. We are constantly reviewing and updating our printed materials, our brochures and our mailings, updating our current website so that way it's informative, interactive, user-friendly. We can always do better in educating and communicating. An example is our most recently updated property maintenance brochure. It's a proactive mindset to the residents that gives them the power to understand what their responsibilities are, what they can address, what are the expectations, what are the code enforcement violations that we look at that are the most common ones in their areas, what are the trends that are happening. We address those. Finally, we want to end on positive notes here. These are two positive results, before and after photos, of our interaction with the community and what code enforcement does. On the left-hand side is a neglected, blighted property with numerous vehicles. In this situation, again, it was a homeowner of an elderly homeowner, very limited means and very poor health with very limited resources in family and friends to assist him in this particular situation. We stepped in, we helped him again, we gave him the dignity and the respect that an individual deserved, and we gave him some options. We told him what resources were available, and to the right is his property there after the fact. The final one, again, is in another neighborhood that was a neglected income property. Simple fix. You address it. We communicated with the homeowner. The property homeowner was an absentee homeowner, that the property was not occupied at the time, so nothing was getting done. Just because they're not in that apartment or their home doesn't mean the property shouldn't be maintained. We communicated with that homeowner and that property owner, and to the right you'll see a simple fix: property maintenance, mow the grass, lift the shutters up. Simple as that. The neighbors were very happy with that result. And that right now concludes our Code Enforcement 101. We thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this and to tell you a little bit about us. As Code Enforcement Manager Rick Torrance said, at any time, if you have any questions, if you want to discuss this a bit more in depth and regarding the photos, or even to explain how our EPZB and our database works and the way we document our code notes in EPZB, we welcome the opportunity one-on-one to speak with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. Okay, Commissioner Marino, you're recognized.
Thank you. I know when you said that you went out and you shared resources, did you use some CDBG money for that? Because I know that in Palm Beach Gardens, when our code enforcement, and pardon me for putting the Palm Beach Gardens hat on for a second, but when code enforcement, and oftentimes these blighted homes are, as you said, with residents that are elderly or they've fallen on hard times, and when the code enforcement officers went out, because of someone calling code, they were able to share the resources that there were CDBG grant dollars available to help them, and actually some of our staff some of the code enforcement staff and city staff would actually go out and help the homeowner, whether it was paint or mow or something like that. So I didn't know if that was one of the resources that you were sharing with them.
Well, we work with OCR a lot, and he helps us. He helps us a lot with all these issues, especially in the CCRT areas. But he has good contacts that we can work with sometimes to help people out additionally.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions at this time? I have one, though. Early on in your presentation, you talked about something called curb stoning. What is it?
So it's pretty much ceased now, but at one point in time, probably 4 or 5 years ago, especially at Hypoluxo on 95, there was a vacant lot there, and every weekend it would be a used car lot. These independent car salesmen will go to auction, buy several cars. They have no place to put them because they're basically running the operation out of their house. So they'll find county road right-of-ways to place these vehicles and put for sale signs on them. They're typically on county property or county easements. There's no tags on them. They cover up the VIN number. They'll just be a for sale sign on the car. So PBSO, or we passed an ordinance with PBSO, they would go out there, find these vehicles because it was prevalent, it was bad. Like literally at that lot at Hypoluxo on 95, there'd be 50 cars there on a Saturday, creating traffic problems with people coming in and out. So what they do is they would tell them, and then there was a process. Once they were towed, they would come to code enforcement. There was a fine involved. They would pay the fine. But these were unscrupulous auto salespeople. That some of them weren't even in the county. They would come up for other counties to sell their vehicles here. But with that aggressive plan, it pretty much put a stop to most of it. We probably do 2 or 3 a year now, where it was 50 or 60 with the onset of that ordinance. So it's pretty much come to a close, but it's still there if we need to use it.
In the past, I know with some of my constituents, they were having issues with Airbnb type, I shouldn't use their name, but those short-term rental properties being utilized for parties, big events, and so forth. And it would happen, at night, and a lot of times very late at night, when the issues would come up. What's the process for people trying to get relief when something like that happens?
Well, there was legislature passed in, I believe, 2017 or 2018, and it basically said if local municipalities didn't have an ordinance on the books, they couldn't make an ordinance after that date. So how we address those issues is the ancillary issues. We address the noise, we address the parking, we address overcrowding. Typically, we find that they subdivide the residents. They want multiple tenants to be able to rent out. So if we can gain access or have proof that they've taken a single-family residence and turned it into 2, 3, or more vacation rentals, we address that. So we address the ancillary things. So if the noise is an issue, we work with PBSO because we don't typically work at night unless we know that it's something we need to go do, but we can't ever foresee a party that's going to happen at an Airbnb. So PBSO will go out, document the issue. They'll turn the police report over to us, and then we would then pursue the case based on their evidence and testimony.
Okay. And I think the other one that we've had to deal with, and you had photos of there, and of this is when they go in and they do unpermitted work, and they don't, unfortunately, I don't know if they're licensed or unlicensed contractors, I guess it doesn't really matter, but then they remove, and we saw the photos of bearing walls being taken down, which causes the unit from above to start to collapse and sink into the unit below. And I know you're working hard to try and educate, but I know, for example, like Century Village has over 100 HOAs. Each building is its own HOA, and I appreciate the efforts to try and educate them as to, if they're hearing construction going on, their board has a responsibility to make sure that in fact what's being done is permitted, if it does, in fact, that type of work require a permit. But I mean, there's been a number of buildings out there where you guys have red tagged them, I guess is what you call it, where both the unit owner above and below are forced out of their units. What's the recourse for the person that's impacted by that? Do they have legal recourse against the property owner below them that did that?
Well, that unit that we showed you in our presentation, they're both currently unoccupied until it gets resolved because it's not safe. Their legal recourse is civilly. They always result in civil lawsuits, but we do our part as far as building, to make sure that it's brought back with proper permits and inspections and it's safe. But it ultimately results in the civil suits between the parties.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for answering those questions. Anybody else? Okay. All right. We have more to go.
Yes, good morning. Lisa Mara, Zoning Director for my part of the presentation today. So we gave a modified version of this presentation last May, and then we had an update last August, but a lot of the commissioners today are new. So we're going to redo some of the things we did last May, and then also we have new information to add as well. So today we talked in February about how the zoning code works and land development regulations, Articles 1 through 8, and then actually all the way up through 1 through 18. So today we'll talk about commercial vehicles, how they're regulated in the county on commercial and residential properties. And a lot of the conversation we just had with code enforcement, they enforce more codes than just Wendy and I's part of the ULDC. We are mostly Articles 1 through 8, and the items that are before you, just as the 3 regular items a couple minutes ago on the agenda, 5, 6, 7? Those ones are an R camp, but as you saw, there's a lot of property maintenance code, fire code, building code that code enforcement does that's beyond our scope. So commercial vehicles are regulated at a state, local, and federal level. And the reason is even though a lot of folks say that they don't harm roads, apparently the federal government does think that they are something to consider when you're doing roadways. So the federal government uses this term called gross vehicle weight rating, GVWR, and that is the weight of the vehicle plus the passengers and the load, the fuel, everything. And that is a term that we use in our code for commercial vehicles. And the government regulates federally different classes of vehicles. Classes 1 and 2 are vehicles such as personal vehicles, trucks, and minivans up through 10,000 pounds. Class 3 is the larger pickups and some mini box trucks up to 14,000 pounds. And there's the Article 1 definition. We go up to 12.5 for our residential commercial vehicle parking. Then there's larger vehicles. Class 4 is between 14 and 16,000 pounds, which is your larger landscape vehicles and box trucks. Class 5 is between 16 and 5,000 pounds for a lot of bucket trucks, cherry pickers, and such. Then Class 6 is up from 19 to 26,000 pounds, school buses, beverage trucks, dump trucks, and such. And then when you're talking Class 7 and higher, you're talking the semi-trucks, concrete trucks, dump trucks, and such. And so when you're talking big rigs, semi-trucks, and such, those are in Class 8 and Class 9, and they're larger than 26,000 pounds, and the federal government describes them as 48 to 65 feet, width of about 8.5 feet, and there's no cap on height, but most are around 13.5 foot tall. So our land development regulations regulate commercial vehicle storage and any vehicle storage in 4 different articles. Article 1, definitions, Article 4, uses, Article 6, parking, and Article 11 with subdivision and access. And vehicles are regulated for non-residential uses and for residential uses as well. And for commercial vehicle storage, they are allowed in commercial properties. And for a minute, I'd like to talk about the managed growth tier system. So this system was adopted in 1999, and it established 5 different tiers with rules by tier. And what's significant about this and about the map that you have here, all before you, which I don't think we need to see it, but we do have a graphic if ever anyone wants to see it. So if you look at this map, all of the red areas on this map are industrial land use where commercial vehicles can be parked, as far as a commercial vehicle storage operation such as a contractor storage yard. And as if you see, in unincorporated county, we have clusters of industrial land use. That paper hat looking area, which is the United Technologies overlay. We have the area near Southern and Jog between Belvedere and Southern around the Turnpike. That's a major industrial corridor. And then there's the Vista Center at Okeechobee and the Turnpike. But a lot of our other industrial land in the county is in municipalities. And as if you could see, the tiers are on this map, with the green being the darkest olive green is the, and actually maybe Valerie, you can put that up. The darkest kind of sage green, that's the Glades tier. There's also a lot of industrial land approved out in the Glades communities. And the blue is the ag reserve, the gray are municipal lands, the beige is the ex-urban tier, which has Palm Beach Country Estates and the acreage, and then the paler green is the Jupiter Farms and some parts of the West Loxahatchee area, which is the rural tier. And as if you notice, there's a lot of white area, West Delray, West Boca, and such, because it was a conscious decision by the Board of County Commissioners way back in the day on where to place industrial lands. And as you can see, they're mostly in the older corridor, and then for unincorporated is clustered around that Southern and then around Palm Beach, the United Technologies overlay. And there's not a lot of opportunities, as you've seen with the Ag Reserve lately, with the commerce requests. And now in that blue area, there's some new areas in red where people are asking to park commercial vehicles. But this was intentional by the board in the 80s. There wasn't as much of an emphasis on the importance of industrial lands in the 80s as we see now. And so that's why there are not a lot of opportunities in those areas where we have those large planned communities in the white there with the West Boca, West Boynton, West Delray. So if we can go, that's a little bit about the managed growth tier system. And so if we go back to the slideshow, you'll see a photo of what is a contractor storage yard. And we regulate these commercial vehicle parking areas in a manner to require them on major thoroughfares. So Article 11, which is our subdivision and access regulations, we require that commercial vehicle storage and actually most commercial operations are on a major county roadway. They have to be typically 80 feet wide, they're maintained by county, they're met our standards. This is a property off of Belvedere Road, and this is the way we regulate commercial uses and commercial vehicle storage for the most part. However, there are opportunities for people in residential areas to bring their vehicle home. So there is the opportunity for that. However, folks are very much concerned about the extent and magnitude of commercial vehicles being brought home, as you've seen over the past 3 to 4 years with landscape service. Mom and pop bringing one vehicle home, 2 vehicle homes home, having a home business, that's something that's anticipated in the county. However, when, at least in the AR areas, however, when the more vehicles and the size of the vehicles draws more attention for compatibility, hours, character issues, environmental concerns. And also our roadways are also not all built the same. So this is a photo of the acreage area. You can see that's Seminole Pratt Whitney Road. It meets all our county standards, but a lot of the roadways off some of these major roads in our rural areas and our areas are not maintained by the county. They're not built at commercial standards. They might be, in this case, they're maintained by the Indian Trails Improvement District. Other areas have their roadways maintained just by the neighbors that are locally, and these vary in their surface. They could be shell or millings, or they could be paved. They could be different standards. So that's something that is very much a consideration when we're talking about residential residential neighborhoods bringing their vehicles home. So about our Unified Land Development Code, we've been regulating commercial vehicle definitions since 1992, and it used to say allow a property owner to bring one commercial vehicle home up to 10,000 pounds. That was increased to 12.5 in about 2007, and there's been a lot of debate and discussion with the public over the past several years because some changes were made in 2019 for agricultural residential in the rural residential flu that caused a lot of confusion with folks. So these are the three on this slide. These are three different definitions. The one on the left is what the code said in 97 and in 92, and currently is on the right. Home occupation, Article 4 lets you, it prohibits commercial vehicles, but then Article 6 says you can bring one home in a different part of the code. So there are uses allowed in residential areas that we regulate, and they're for home occupation. So Article 4 is our article in the code that regulates what all the uses are that we talked about 2 months ago when we had the zoning overview. All uses are regulated by access, location, the acreage, the approval process, the setbacks, the buffering. And in the residential areas, a regular home occupation doesn't need a zoning approval. So this slide here shows what our code says in Article 4 for a regular home occupation. These are the kinds of things if you want to do swimming lessons out of your house, piano lessons, you're an architect, you use your home office, things like this. You don't get a zoning approval. You do need to do a business tax receipt with the tax collector, but there's no zoning approval, and you just go ahead and there's rules that you have to abide by, but there's no approval process for us. Now, in the AR zoning, and this is a map of all the AR zoning in the county, there's different rules and there's more things you could do. Inside and outside the urban-suburban tier, you can have more uses than other areas. And so this is some data. We have about 15,800 parcels, about 21 acres in the acreage of AR. There's 65,000 acres overall for the whole county, but that's just a little bit about AR. Here's another graphic that shows you the acreage itself and lot sizes. The bulk of the lots in the acreage are about 1 1/4 to about 2.5 acres in size, and that color palette shows all the green ones. They're the smaller lots. So one of the things you can do in AR zoning right now, and it's allowed, is you could do limited pet boarding. Limited pet boarding appears to be the most restrictive type of home occupation you can do because you have to get a Class A approval before the board, and you can only have one per every 1,000-foot radius, and that's just to babysit 24 hours a day, 7 dogs. And that was changes that were adopted a couple years ago. You also have to get an animal care and control permit. You have limited hours, and you have some setbacks and requirements and such. So that's an extremely restrictive home occupation. Then you also can do landscape service as a home occupation. You could have it, you could also, in this slide shows how you could have it as a principal use in AR. Those rules were worked out over many years before the board. There's a 3-acre minimum. You have to be on a collector arterial unless you get a Type 2 waiver. And what a Type 2 waiver is it's a board-approved waiver for access. And how this use, it requires you to be located on a collector arterial roadway. And if you're not, you have an avenue to ask permission otherwise, and that's through with the Type 2 waiver. So that is if you're co-located with a retail wholesale nursery, or if you're a home occupation. Very similar rules. And it's in the AR-RSA, which is the AR in the rural tier. There's a cap on the employees and the requirement for parking services. They don't require dump trucks, but anyway, these are all examples of how we've regulated home occupations. So this is some examples of some smaller landscape trucks that would be allowed, and you can currently do on 3 acres with the DRO approval, unless you were on the commercial roadway, in which case you need that waiver. So a couple years ago in 2018, we established something new. It's for a home contractor storage yard. This was established in 2018. with the use regulation project, and this allows 5-acre properties to go through the DRO process to ask for commercial vehicle storage, including semi-trucks. And this again requires that access on the commercial streets unless you ask for the type 2 waiver. There's caps on the number of vehicles. They let you have 1 semi-truck. They exempt from the buffering requirements, but they do require the surface improvement. And these are some vehicles. They're not screened, so they probably wouldn't meet the screening requirements for the commercial storage. But these are just examples of the larger trucks that are allowed in the 5-acre home contractor storage yard. And they would have to be screened and such, but these are the larger ones for the 5 acres and up. So again, what started a lot of this conversation is in 2019, there was changes made that caused a lot of confusion. And so just talking about these slides a little bit, I had this slide earlier talking about how we're regulating the commercial vehicles. You can have 1 per home that doesn't exceed the 12,500 pounds, but a change that was done in 2019 was to recreational vehicles. And up until 2019, you can have 7 RVs and boats and toys, for the lack of a better term, of your personal rec non-business vehicles in AR with rural residential future land use. And that was changed in 2019, and now under the current code, you can only have 1 RV and a maximum of 2 boats on trailers or 3 overall, and you have to have screening. And those were not in place prior to 2019, and that was the change that was done, and that was the wording that was changed. So the other thing that was done in 2019 is up until 2019, there was this language on the left that said you can park up to 7 vehicles, and one of those things is it references commercial vehicles. And when this was removed in 2019, it created a lot of confusion because then folks were saying, well, this meant we could park 7 semi-trucks, and though that didn't, because the other parts of the code, Article 4 and Article 7, capped it at the 12.5. So this is just, you know, unfortunately with the structure of our code and lots of bits and pieces, we're hoping to revise in the future, but that's just a little bit of background on what drew a lot of the attention. So what we'd like to talk about today is we don't have any motions proposed. We don't have any proposal for revisions to the code today, but it's just for your thought on what we've heard from the folks coming out. And if we are going to regulate and change some of our rules, the things we need to look at are kind of summarized on this slide. What would approval processes be, if any? What would the zoning districts be? Again, the only changes in 2019 were agricultural residential in the rural residential areas, which is only acreage, Palm Beach Country Estates, Heritage Farms, and Jupiter Farms. There was no changes made inside the urban suburban tier a couple years ago. There's no change to Square Lake. There was no change to Biltmore Acres. Staff wouldn't, you know, we're not proposing any changes at all, but if we were, we would focus on those ARRR areas. But if we are going to come up with regulation, and if there's any feedback you want to give us today, it would be on these topic areas: screening, setbacks, hours, separation. And we'd like to update you a little bit on where we've been over the past 30 days or so. We've done more research since the presentation that we published a month ago. We've reached out to the tax collector and we gathered some business tax receipt data. We discovered that there's 3,000 home occupations in the acreage and Jupiter Farms alone. And a lot of these are ones that don't have code violations, and you don't even know that they have them because they're operating out of their home with an electrician and a plumber and a lot of interior designers, lots of interior designers. They're all over, but you'd never know they were there because they're operating out of their spare room. We've learned a lot about the roadways. A lot of our roadways are radically different. Indian Trails improves to its standards. Sir Wicked up in North County has their standards. They're a water control district. They're not an improvement district. We have our county standards. All of these things, if we're going to make any changes, we would have to look at, and a lot more research than we've been able to pull together today. We've also looked at the state definition. The state definition on the right-hand side, they use the term commercial vehicle as over 26,001 pounds. That's something else we've discovered. And we had an outreach meeting last Thursday. We invited a bunch of folks, and something that wasn't really understood is that before last meeting, as you all know, we all received 300 to 400 emails from folks saying approve commercial vehicles, or some said don't approve commercial vehicles. So in response to all those emails, last Thursday we had a meeting and we invited folks to come out, and we said anyone can come out, but what we're trying to do is gather. We had a survey and we're trying to ask people, how many vehicles do you have? Where do you park them? What are some ideas? What is the magnitude of commercial vehicles out there? And what we've kind of think, because of the magnitude of the business tax receipts, the code violations, we don't think there's a tremendous amount of semi-trucks out in the acreage today, but there are a lot of home business. We heard a lot of folks last week. I'd like to tell you what we heard about. There was people who have been running a fence company for the past 20 years. There's folks that used to get an occupational license around, and they've had it for 20 years, and a couple small trucks. One gentleman, I believe he had 5 450s, but he didn't have a semi-truck. But everybody, it seems, is a different business and a different type of vehicle. And they're not all equal. We were hoping to kind of categorize a little bit on what we saw, and we also heard, other things that we heard was fences. So horses need 5-foot fences. I don't know why our code has a 4-foot in the front when your pony's going to jump over and it's going to run away. So that's something that I think that we don't really need direction on today, but I think we need to look at our codes a little bit with some agricultural fencing. I didn't hear it, and hedges. So we cap our hedges in the front yard at 4 feet and 6 foot in the rear. We're discovering when we're talking to folks that that's a problem, and they'd really like a higher hedge in the rear. And we don't know why that code has been there for so long, but I think no one seems to be opposing a slightly larger hedge in the rear for any reason, not just for the commercial vehicles. We also talked about RVs. So RVs are big. Some are really, really big. They're really nice ones. And a lot of folks talk about that they want to go back in the AR to having 2 RVs, or they talk about how they used to have a bunch of boats and things. And so I think that we've heard a lot of support, both in the meeting and outside, that perhaps we should consider in the AR rural areas allowing more of the way it was on RVs prior to 2019. And then on the commercial vehicles. So again, we tried to see if we can categorize what I heard a lot of feedback both at the meeting and actually talking to people on the phone. I spoke to a lot of people in other neighborhoods like Seminole Ranches and Heritage Farms and Square Lake, and I kind of started hearing a theme that a mom and pop with a couple commercial vehicles is not the big concern. What really gets people concerned, 5, 6, 10-acre concrete trucks starting up at 3 in the morning and all of the employees flooding in. And I heard from ITID that swales and culverts and the size of the semi-trucks parking on these properties is an issue. And a lot of folks that came out, though, on the 2nd said we would park any vehicles on our property. They would be in a garage or screened or such. We heard a lot of conversation on the 20th. 47 people came out. There was over 20 cards. They said they're at the table and they want to talk about changes. Other suggestions that were thrown out is registering vehicles or grandfathering in the pre-19 ones. And then a lot of folks said don't change anything. A lot of the folks that didn't come to the meeting that emailed and reached out, leave them the way they are, leave the 12.5 cap and such. But something that came up in the meeting is that some of these personal vehicles are very large. So here's a graphic with F450s and F550s. Some of these trucks are really big and upwards of 20,000 pounds. And if you're towing more than 10,000 pounds, I believe you need a CDL. And these are often considered personal vehicles, but they're over that 12.5 weight. And then this graphic shows some of the larger vehicles. That one in the upper right, that seems to be a really popular small landscape truck. You'll probably see them all the time. Someone will own a small little landscape truck like that. It's an Isuzu, about 14,000 pounds. They'll tow their little enclosed trailers with their equipment. even that is pushing the envelope about what's allowed. But then again, you know, those other trucks there's the dump trucks and the semi-trucks over the 26,000 pounds, that seems to be what's shaking out as a real dividing line between trucks that draw more damage to roadways and more issues and need maybe a different review process is the larger ones that, like the dump truck and the semi-truck versus the small ones. And the last thing I want to say is, like Miami-Dade, they categorize their vehicles, and if we're going to start looking at divvying up different categories, I think they have a good baseline. They do a category 1, category 2, category 3. They outright ban the semi-trucks, but if the county was to consider any kind of allowing those, it definitely seems like there would be an opportunity for a discussion for a different path for the semi-trucks versus the small box and landscape trucks, which are smaller, because that's, you know, I'm trying to kind of gather data and try to I was hoping to put it in nice little tidy little boxes, but there's still so much research to be done and so much conversation. But that's everything we've learned over the past month, and I think that concludes my presentation for any questions.
All right. So, back to the board. Any comments, questions? Okay. Commissioner Baxter and then Vice Mayor Sachs.
Thank you for putting this together and all the hard work you guys have done, attending town halls, meeting with residents, doing everything. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your efforts and what we're trying to establish. Question, you had mentioned something, are we requiring in the code right now, Father, are we requiring boats to be buffered?
Yeah, before 2019, the code allowed you to, in the AR rural areas, you could have your boats and your RVs on your property. But when that change happened in 2019, it required the urban style of screening and parking of boats and RVs out in the rural areas.
And so are people parking them in their backyard?
They talked about that last week, that they didn't want to. And you know, I live in an urban area, and it's just understood that you keep your boat and your RV in your backyard, but that was something that, and a lot of folks in that outreach, either at the meeting or on the phone, didn't know that change occurred with the RVs and the boats in 2019.
I know in Royal Palm, they allow boats in the driveway. Most places in the county do the same, or no?
I'm not sure. In my town, in Lake Worth, it's not allowed, but I see a lot of boats in the driveways. So.
All right, sorry. I just found that kind of interesting when you were saying that. But to the bigger point, and why I guess this is all started, I think we all know industrial commercial space is a premium. I mean, it's very, very expensive. And so what ends up happening is people are then we need a space for people to start a small business, grow a small business. And I know from personal experience, you don't necessarily have millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars to go buy a space in the correct area. And I believe the Acreage, Loxahatchee, have been doing such an amazing job fulfilling that need within the county. I mean, all the businesses, you went over it, out there, they're unlimited amount of businesses out there, and rightfully so. I guess what I would, one of the questions that I had for you, are all those businesses out there now generating additional trips as well in roads?
And theoretically, but with commercial vehicles or your home vehicle, you're leaving home to go to work. I think one of the big concerns is when a mom and pop turns into getting the employees coming out to the house, parking, and then leaving. I think that's the biggest trip concern. But if you have your electrician van and you're leaving from your van, I don't think that I mean, Quasi's here, I think, somewhere in the back, but I don't think that's a concern as much as when they're the larger size and you're having your employees come into the property. We did hear, there are properties that have 30 vehicles, not in the acreage area, but some rural areas, and that was some of the experience in Heritage Farms. When you're looking at 30 commercial vehicles and 30 employees coming in, that's where the trip thing really kicks off.
And I have to agree. I mean, nobody wants to live next to a commercial parking lot with, 10, 20 commercial vehicles. No, and I do know with talking with you and residents, they have been more than willing to accommodate to anything we've wanted. They've been willing to do buffers. They've been willing to do maybe even like a simple permit process where we could verify that it is owner-operated or the vehicle of the company they work for, just so they can stay at home, which also, to Commissioner Marino's point, when you're closer, you don't have to drive further, then it's actually helping, with any kind of being more green. So I just think this serves a lot of purposes. I can't even value enough how, if you have something, you're wearing something, you eat something, semi-trucks that seem to be getting a bad rap, nobody wants them, are what brought those here and have continued to serve our community. I mean, there are a decent amount of just the minority-owned small businesses that exist within those acres. Now, it might not be suitable maybe for all of AR, depending on what my fellow commissioners are going to discuss, but I think at minimum, we need to look at the area in the acreage in Loxahatchee. So thank you.
Vice Mayor, you recognize.
Thank you, Mayor. We have such a changing landscape of what's happening in the county, and I'm really appreciate what you have done, Lisa, in reviewing the past rules and regulations and ordinances with regard to zoning and what people can do. I think this is particularly of concern post-COVID, because a lot of folks couldn't go to work, so they kept their businesses at home. Then they realized how nice it is to be at home, and they decided to stay at home and then to grow their business out of their home. So, and also there's a new state law with regard to the right to work and people having the right to work out of their homes. So I appreciate what you have done in reviewing the ordinances, and I very much appreciate this. I love maps, and it really shows the need that we probably will have to change this landscape, change these colors, so that there's more support for those who prefer to work from home. My question is this: who has the jurisdiction over the cities with city ordinances and zoning? Does the county have superior jurisdiction over cities, or is it concurrent, or do they have exclusive jurisdiction over zoning?
The cities in our county do their 100% their own jurisdictions. In Broward, for example, there was a countywide strategy for annexation, and they have their different kind of governmental structure, but in our county, each local government does its own planning and does its own zoning. So Wendy and I's jurisdiction, your jurisdiction is everything on the map. Our jurisdiction is everything that's not gray, because any of the gray ones come out of our camp and the PZB camp.
So if somebody doesn't like a county zoning ordinance or regulation, they move to the city, or vice versa, then they have exclusive jurisdiction over the city ordinances, and we take care of all of the county. We don't supersede theirs at all. Okay,
No.
Very good. Thank you very much. It was excellent, and thank you for reviewing it. And now we're going to review it again to see if we need to make any more changes to really keep up with what's going on with businesses and commercial vehicles and things like that. Thank you, staff. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Anybody else here on the board? Is there, what's that? Not at the moment. Is there, okay. All right. Well, we have some cards here. Here's the thing. This is not a decision-making item. This was an informational item. I spoke with the county attorney to understand what is required by law, and since anything that happens would have to come back to be as an ordinance or a change or something, and the public would have an opportunity to weigh in. However, since there are a number of people that did come today, we are going to allow some speaking. Although I have to say, I think many of you have been here before. I don't know that there's anything new, so I think if there's something specific you heard in the presentation, specifically that's either incorrect, that has been presented to us, that would be of importance for us to know. If it's about an opinion about something, I think we probably had the opportunity to hear your opinion, and you will have, if there are any changes that are going to be made, everybody will have an opportunity to fully weigh in on it before it's adjudicated. So with that, we are going to allow speaking this morning. We have, I think, 20 some odd cards.
11.
Oh, we have
11 speaking.
We have 11 speaking cards. All right, well, in that case, if we have 11 speaking cards, we'll allocate 2 minutes per speaker. We'll go through those. We're not accepting additional cards at this time. That's okay, it's not your bad.
So we have, and please use both podiums, Rita Miller, followed by George Cummins, followed by Christian Acosta, followed by someone who lives at 128 Trail North, Jupiter, Florida. I can't read your writing, sorry.
Rita Miller, 4902 121st Terrace North, Royal Palm Beach, but I live in the acreage. It's a little enclave. I'm here because I'm concerned about differences, diversity, and inconsistencies in this process that we're seeing. And Lisa and I went through managed growth tier system, developing policies for special, different diverse areas of Palm Beach County. And it was a revolutionary thing because nobody had ever done it before. We were the first ones that got the opportunity to give residents the rights that they didn't have before. Everything was always peanut butter urban sprawl. So I'm going to deal with broad code here, broad land use, and then I'm going to try, if I have enough time, to go down to more detailed code. Central Western communities of Palm Beach County include large exurban communities of thousands of acres with thousands of residents of diverse social, cultural, and economic levels, have a wider range of lifestyle choices and land uses than urban communities. The Board of County Commissioners encourage diversity by accepting and approving public consensus and exurban tier objectives, goals, and policies of county's national award-winning comprehensive land use plan to manage growth with a balance of land uses to support many lifestyle choices. Exurban tier communities are not urban sprawl. Thousands of residents worked with the BCC in due process for years for new land use policies and new codes to allow more diversity in land use and lifestyles than ever before, like home-based businesses to provide local and county residents with products and services, and ways to keep vehicles and equipment on sites for diverse activities, businesses, and land uses. Exurban diversity and sustainability are destroyed by urban demands and expectations in complaint code enforcement wars, which divide communities like ours into upper and lower classes with inconsistent, confusing, unnecessary, expensive hardships that hurt average and lower income residents and small businesses the most, as current distress shows. Exurban tier residents need means to keep their property, businesses, jobs, and assets and stay in their communities. Because Palm Beach County is a charter county, I ask the Board of County Commissioners to facilitate a referendum to protect the exurban tier coexistence of diverse social economic levels.
Thank you very much. Your 2 minutes has expired.
I'd like to submit.
We'd be delighted to take your comments in writing.
Thank you.
I would like to submit also just some of our residents who are opposed about the commercial vehicles in the AR residential AR system. Good morning. I'm a retired professional pilot. I retired out to what we call the country many years ago. Now the city's growing around us. I understand that, It was rural areas, country living. The zoning is ag residential, which is ag residential. It's been ag residential and should remain ag residential. I'm in the Seminole Ranches community, which was mentioned on the wall. It's similar to the Heritage Farms, but we don't have the incursion of as many commercial businesses, but we do have problems with some of them out there. I understand residential property is cheaper than commercial property, and unfair advantage would be given to landscapers and some people to use their agricultural residential property for this reason. So I'm kind of opposed to that. There is other zoning land that could be used for that. I mean, my goodness, I'm in a residential community. If you start allowing trucks, and I'm sure that's not going to happen according to what I heard earlier, but I could fit about 45 trucks on my property, and I could retire very nicely. Another question I have, if these companies are allowed to move these vehicles into these areas, would they be able to keep or get an ag exemption on their taxes, which I'm concerned about? Also, just for the back of your mind, I'm a little concerned about the lack of removing commercial operators that are in violations of the zoning laws. Fines are processed. It seems like there's a lack of stopping these as long as they pay the fines. I know you can go into tax liens and things like that. It's a slow process, and I've been a little concerned about that.
Thank you
very much for your time.
Mr. Cummins, can you share your address?
It's on the form.
Well, one of our commissioners has asked that everybody share their address, and so I'll make that request of you.
5155 Mitchlar Drive, Lake Worth.
Thank you very much, sir. So request, if everybody, as you come up, if you'll share your name and address before you begin your comments, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, hi, my name is Christian Acosta. I live in 2528 Palm Beach Gardens, Gardens Parkway. I'm actually here just to deliver a quick message that Representative Rick Roth asked me to read. I'll try and be brief. He wants to thank the commissioners for taking the time now and in the future to discuss potentially updating and improving the Palm Beach ULDC. He believes that there's primarily two issues that are ongoing and need to be addressed. One of them is, of course, looking into the practices of code enforcement, and I'm glad that that's being done. He says that they need to continue to make sure that even though a lot of good work is done, that there are not individuals who are unfortunately overly given notices of violations or put down a process where they're never going to get, say, a waiver, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and get it anyway. The second issue is more complex and requires sound judgment and compromise, and it has to do with allowing everybody to be able to live in our areas and coexist while still being able to make a living. Residents who own commercial vehicles have been in the rural areas with relatively little interaction with county government for a long time, successfully. We need to make sure that even though rapid population growth is occurring in the county, that everyone who may happen to own a commercial vehicle and park it on their property is able to live in concert with their neighbors. If this requires some sort of permitting process, that would be acceptable, but the focus must always be on allowing a resident to park and operate a commercial vehicle that they may need in order to be able to put food on the table for their families. We're not talking about parking lots of vehicles. We're talking about, I'm a commercial truck driver. 12,500 pounds with respect may not be significant or sufficient. The second issue is in dealing with nurseries and ancillary landscape operations. Representative Roth believes that the misinformation or the confusion here is treating a small nursery operation the same as a large. A small nursery operation cannot produce product with the same price as a large operation. They require ancillary landscaping, such as a retail ability to sell their own products in order to make ends meet. If you treat them the same, you will create a situation where a lot of small nurseries are out of business, as has happened with 30% of them. He, of course, thanks your indulgence and hopes that you'll be able to rectify these.
Thank you. Whoever put the card in from 128 Trail North in Jupiter, there's a I wish to speak or I wish to not speak. I really don't see. Both are checked, and neither support or oppose is checked. Are you here?
Is it 16429?
Yes, it is. Thank you, sir.
Probably is. I couldn't see it. I didn't have my glasses. I applaud you today for the job you're doing. Compliance is doing an awesome job from the pictures I've seen up there.
Could you give us your name also?
Can you give us your name and your address, please?
I'm in Jupiter Farms.
can you give us your address, please?
16429, 128 Trail North. You guys have been doing an awesome job. I appreciate it. From the pictures I've seen, sounds like there's a lot needs to be done. I was just here because of the representation. I wanted to make sure that Jupiter Farms had a representation of the homeowner. I understood they was a self-appointed homeowner association. I'd like that answer, yes or no. My thing is, I'm a contractor. I've worked for Bergen DeVosta for 30 years. Everything that has carpet in it, I've done it. But I have a couple boats and a couple play toys, and I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to have to move those. So that's my concern, basically. But when I see all the pictures you got up here, I don't think you're going to bother me because it ain't in disrepair like this. So it's a safety issue. So I appreciate the job you're doing. But that was my question, was Jupiter Farms, is it self-appointed homeowner association? Because I wanted somebody to represent us. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Natalie Milian, Daniel Esposito, Ashley Davis, Matt Reinholtz.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for everything that you're doing. I appreciate all the diligent work that you have presented today. My name is Natalie Milian. I am at 16139 East Pleasure Drive in Loxahatchee, Florida. I wanted to ask a quick question regarding the presentation. It says that it was always written that 12,500 pounds, 29 feet tall, and 26 feet long. Yet, if we look at Table 6A, 1D, minimum floor length, and then 19 is parking, equipment, vehicle, boats, vessels, trailers in residential area, it clearly says, for the purpose of this section, the AR district in lands designated rural residential in the plan shall not be considered a residential district. And then underneath is where we say that it says exceptions, the following exceptions shall apply to parcels in residential district unless the parcel is vacant. And that's where the 12,500 pounds is listed. So technically, if I'm not mistaken, we were exempt from that, which is just something I wanted to note. Another thing is, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but I've moved several loads with Florida Crystals and Domino Foods, which is also a part of Florida Crystals. And I've also moved at the Palm Beach Aggregates. And all those are big industrial companies, and those transit my roads all the time. They are right near me. The traffic will not stop. The road damage will not stop. It's not caused by us residents parking in our properties, which I've said several times, and I don't want to bore you guys. Just wanted to state that out, that traffic will continue regardless, and the infrastructure, it's there. So I don't think we're really causing any damage ourselves. And another thing I wanted to point out is it was said that Indian Trail said the culverts were not, in support of our trucks, etc. I might be wording that incorrectly, but I did get a permit from Indian Trail myself to extend my culvert to properly park my vehicle inside my property. I'm not leaving it out in a culvert. That's not what we're asking for. A lot of the pictures in the presentation showed bad examples, and I think we might want to have more pictures taken. Thank you for your time.
Name and address, please.
Good morning. Daniel Esposito, 15554 Tangerine Boulevard, Loxahatchee, Florida. Been there 30 years. Been in business 21 years. Have a semi. Had employees. My neighbors all the way around me never had an issue, any complaints whatsoever. A guy 8 blocks away filed a complaint, and now I have a bunch of issues. My company is locally run. I own it. We run strictly Palm Beach County. I pump in $650,000 a year into Palm Beach County to other businesses, people who work for me. I would appreciate it. And my home does not look nothing like these pictures, which I agree. These people, they have an important mission to do. But my business should not, I should not be put out of business because I'm not smart enough to be where you're at. I'm smart enough to drive a truck. So I should not be put out of business for not being able to go to college and do what you did. Thank you. I'll leave you alone.
Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. It's something I had forgotten to mention that he did remind me of. So truckers have been, allowed or not, confusing or not, as the code may be, been parking in the Acreage Loxahatchee area for decades. And it never, in our code, I found out, to my surprise, is permissive, meaning if it is not specifically allowed, it is disallowed. And so I don't think we ever really needed to have this conversation before about needing to have them allowed or not. But we have reached a point with the amount of growth and people moving out there and people complaining, it's brought us to the point of needing to reevaluate and, you know, allow people that have been there for decades with seemingly no problems, a pathway forward. But he reminded me something that I thought was very interesting.
Name and address, please.
Yes, Ashley Davis, 16973 West Derby Drive. I am the one that had the horse farm that had been harassed for 3 years. I'm still currently accumulating fines. And I want to represent like the agricultural properties that are out in the acreage. Most of the people here that are being affected with the semi issue live in ag residential zonings. Some of them do have agricultural classifications. And I feel like the acreage should be looked at a little bit differently than some of the areas that were done on the PowerPoint presentation. It was a really great PowerPoint presentation, but there's also another hidden side of it where there were so many of us that were harassed for so long that they left the area and sold off. And I know that as soon as I put my property up for sale, my harassment stopped. The people in this room were real business owners. Like we're at our breaking point. I got kicked because it was anonymous at that point. So once you're on the hot seat, it's easy enough to not show up at these meetings because it doesn't affect you. But long term, those of us that are left here are fighting for all we have left, which is our property. And the fact that so many of our agricultural exemption properties are dissipating from our area, it is changing. We didn't ask for Westlake, for a city to be built where we were ag residential and left alone. We're allowed to have boats, we were allowed to have all those things, and it left unnoticed. Now that there's a city and a bunch of people that want to complain about it, we're forced to sell, and it's not fair. I did start an Acreage Farmers Association to hopefully, in an effort to work with code enforcement, to educate new residents that want backyard homesteads, that want guidance through the process. I feel like through my magistrate hearings, once I finally got one, that I had to learn the ins and outs of my rights as a property owner and my agricultural exemption. I really would like to make the matter of fact that we could leave the Right to Farm Act, not case-by-case basis where Palm Beach County kind of can trump that. I think it's a statewide necessity. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Sachs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor.
Matt Ryan. 1 second.
Just 1 second. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to ask staff. This is an issue that's going around. We're not the only community that's having this conflict. In fact, probably is the story of the American West, where you have conflicts between ranchers and farmers and fences and no fences. But the issue with horse farms and previously agricultural areas, and then the start of a new city in an area, can we study that a bit? Because this is coming along throughout the county, where we have had traditional horse farms in the area, and now we have encroaching cities and people who want to live in cities, and the influx of people from out of state. We're really paradise here. So I see this conflict coming, and I think we need to be prepared for it so that we don't lose our small farms or small stables for horses and other livestock. So I wonder if we could take a look at this and see how we can resolve this issue before it becomes a real conflict between the two types of developments: those that have been here for years and have have a toehold in our community, and those rights of city people who want to come and develop a city, but horses sometimes and city folk sometimes don't get along so well if they're next to each other. I wonder if we could just take a look at that, because it's not just in the acreage, it's the entire county that we're changing. As I said before, the landscape is changing, and I wonder if we could take a look at our codes to see how we can be able to permit both lifestyles in a very respectful way.
One thing to talk about that is
Excuse me,
just-
one second.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was trying to allow some latitude, but I'm going to ask that we stop with the applause so we can continue on the discussion as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Last month or the month before, we adopted revisions to the ULDC to remove restrictions for agriculture in the urban-suburban tier. And those had been put in place in the early 90s when the decision was by the elected officials and by staff recommendation is that everything in the urban areas should urbanize and become planned developments. And then in 1999 with the managed growth tier system, and as Rita Miller mentioned, we had a lot of outreach with the community and recognized independent areas. And what we're seeing now, a year and a half ago, we hired a consultant in the county named, she was a former legislator called Katie Walpole Edwards, and she worked with us to revamp on how we looked at non-residential farm building affidavits and how we redid our process. And so there was a lot of emphasis from her how we need to, because of right to farm, not constrain commercial ag operations for fences and setbacks and building permits if they were a legit agricultural operation. And we did. We've changed our system. We issue these agricultural use assessments, and zoning can look at those and allow exemptions for fences and setbacks and such. However, what we've discovered over the past year is that hobby farms are kind of not protected as much as maybe we can look at. So that's the next area for, like, for example, to have your, right now, if you're a commercial ag operation, you can have your extra tall fence for your horse. But the code isn't as flexible as I think as it should be for the hobby farms, for the hobbyists, the homesteaders, and that is absolutely an area that we need to look at. Timing, warranted, but I'm looking at Patrick Rudder on his thoughts on that.
Oh, okay, good.
And Vice Mayor, the only other piece I was going to add was, taking a step, level up. You talk about horse farms and other things. We maintain and will process a lot of properties coming through for approvals and have to acknowledge, A, their existing property rights, and B, requests they may have. So this board has seen many, many requests in the Ag Reserve, but I would point out, and the first example that comes to mind is the larger developments at the corner of Lake Worth Road and the Turnpike on the west side there. And Lisa and I have been around too long, and were involved 15, 20 years ago in properties when development pressures came that way, and a lot of the properties at the time said we're not going to sell were polo fields. They sold 5 years later. You see what the resulting pieces are now. Many, many of those properties, I think almost all of them, came to boards of the past and sought density increases. So they sought those approvals. These are property owners who agreed to do this, who consented to seek the enhancements. So there is the development pressure. We respond and react to it, have many challenges, definitely get it. The world is growing. We have properties, and we will respond to it, but there's a strong need to address and respect the property rights of many of these. And again, this board has seen and will continue to see many of them as they seek enhancements to their development abilities.
So can we, Mayor, if I may, continue, can we review this? The hobby horse farms, it's so wonderful to be able to take your kids to horseback riding lessons where you don't have to drive to a place like Wellington, or if it's, it's in your community. People move to the acreage and Loxahatchee for this type of lifestyle. So I wonder if we could review this in terms of the respecting, as Patrick said, respecting the property rights of those who have been here for many years, to conserve and preserve that traditional rural lifestyle and character, while also allowing those areas where people want to develop into cities. And you'll probably find a lot of the city folk will come over and want to enjoy some of the agricultural interests in the others. So, as you said, Lisa, this is something that we hasn't been addressed yet, and I wonder if we could, and maybe we could review it after you're finished with it, and then we could look at it in terms of putting it in our code. Okay.
Commissioner
thank you.
Baxter, you're recognized.
Just for clarification, what direction or what would you need from us, or what would you like to see in regards to what we've heard today and what we're hearing from residents, as far as, I think everyone knows, and I've been pretty clear where I stand. I don't think it should be commercial parking lots, but I do think we should allow people to park on their own private property that they pay for, and not have to, whether it's driving further away from where you live or whatnot, but what kind of direction are you looking for from, not what you're looking for, but how would you like that, you know what I want. So how would you like direction to be given from us in regards to this?
And I hear your question. Maybe it would be better when we return back after we finish all our comments, so we can allow people to make their comments, and then we can bring it back to the board and we can have a discussion.
I guess the reason I ask is so that based on what we're hearing and taking that all into consideration, the next steps forward, but I hear you also, and we can do that way as well.
Just to be considerate to the folks that are here, I thought.
Absolutely,
don't
thank
mind.
you. Mhm.
Okay. All right. You want to go? Let's go with the cards. Next. Mr. Reinholz, I think you're next.
We have several more cards. Matt Reinholz, Oscar Montoya, Luis Alfonso, and Rayson McCarron. Please give us your name and address.
Matt Reinholz, 18965 131st Trail North, Jupiter Farms. Lisa, thank you. You did a great job in clarifying a lot of that. I just want to touch on the road issue. We always hear about the roads can't handle these trucks and these equipment. But to say that garbage trucks are on our roads, dirt, mixed use, concrete, asphalt, on a weekly basis, twice a week, picking up trash, and they have a huge impact on the road traffic and the weight. A loaded garbage truck is 60,000 pounds. And to say that, a landscape truck or Amazon trucks or everybody else, or just a tractor trailer without the trailer is the issue is a bit much. So these roads can handle this heavy equipment, especially in the agricultural area. We have dirt roads, and how can you break dirt? It's pliable. It goes with it. So I do appreciate the perspective and everybody's hard work, but I do want to put the road issue to bed because I haven't even seen any real evidence of damage on the road since I've been attending these meetings. There's been a lot of talk about it, but nobody said, hey, look at this road. It is damaged because of a lot of traffic. And who's it actually caused by? The garbage trucks? And if the roads aren't safe, then we shouldn't have fire trucks go down them because fire trucks weigh a lot. We'd have to look at that. That's just a little bit of perspective when we talk about usability of a lot of these mixed-use roads. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Oscar Montoya. My address is 16115 Okeechobee Boulevard, Los Ajaxi, Florida. I want to ask something to the inspector. In 2016, I got one inspection, and the inspector, when they get the picture to my house, tell me I can have 2 trucks. And she say some confusion, but I don't know for who was the confusion, for the person or for the inspector. Because if the inspector tell me in that time we can have a truck, 2 trucks in that moment, how I can know he is the right? Because he got the same position she have it. Right now, she can say, no, that guy is wrong. But had the same position. Something more. I see some pictures with some truck. He say it's allowed, so he let him have this kind of truck because it's a small or is he got the dimension. But I know some of the neighbors had problems with the inspector. He got citation for that. Well, I'm gonna tell him, hey, you know what? And that meeting say, you don't have problem. Go see it. Take that right away. The reality is our community want this. I want to ask Sarah Buster, how many emails do you receive for hot truck from our community?
Mayor, do you mind if I answer?
We typically don't
No,
answer questions.
I'm asking. Do you
Oh,
mind? We
that
re-
is nice, but it's gonna be really nice to know how many, and you see how many our neighbor want this. Something more. How many of you know the Los Sahachi?
Thank you very much, sir.
Lisa had already said, it's just going to say between 300 to 400, and when my staff did the analysis, we were at about 75, 80% in favor.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Luis Alfaro. I live in 16975 West Braidwich, Los Sahachi. Quiero decir que no creo que los Sahachi se quieran convertir en la ciudad de Palm Springs o de Haverhill, etc.
He says that he doesn't want to see Loxahatchee become Palm Springs or any other city.
Nosotros tenemos un negocio pequeño, 2 camiones. Nos llevamos bien con los vecinos. No tenemos problemas.
We're a small business operators. We only have 2 trucks. One is his son, and he doesn't have any problems with his neighbor.
Entonces no creo que porque hayan 10 quejas por vecinos con camiones, tengamos que irnos todos.
And he doesn't think it's fair that if we have 10 bad examples and citations from other people, that we all have to suffer from those consequences.
Pienso que esas quejas hay que resolverlas puntualmente. Ir con el camionero, con el dueño del camión, y decirle, usted no puede hacer esto, usted no puede hacer esto otro.
And I think each and every one of those bad example cases should be spoken to with the owner of the vehicle or the house and told to bring into compliance or else move away or, come to a solution.
Es todo.
And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaking card is Raisa McCarron, and I think she was outside. Raisa, can you hear?
Do the non-speaking cards.
And then I have several non-speaking cards.
Oh, here she comes.
Name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, Risa McCarahar, 6569 Park Lane, East Wellington. I just want to say that opening this up, the ag land is under attack. Opening up ag land to other uses would not be beneficial to residential areas. These are not agricultural uses and should not be allowed. I also want to mention, it has come to my attention that Commissioner Baxter is planning to have Heritage Farms overlay spoken about this afternoon, and no one from Heritage Farms has been notified. So before you vote on anything, please notify our community. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Sonia, help, I am a minority-owned business owner who needs relief. Ruben, please help us. We are a community hurting from wrongful codes and it's impacting our small business. Jose, I have a truck and I agree to have them. Ricardo, Alonzo, please help your constituents. We need help. Our small businesses are suffering. John Rollins seems well organized. William Miller, I see that small business in the acreage needs space for their trucks and equipment. The county commission needs to be considerate of these businesses and their considerable contribution to the economy and should not, I can't read the rest, I apologize. And that would be it for the cards.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So let's see. Taking some, who submitted a card? Your name?
Who?
Did you miss one?
After the cutoff, past the deadline.
Oh, did it, it may have come in after we cut off taking in cards? Is that possible? Oh. We have the card? Which card is it?
I don't have any more cards.
Do we have any cards that we didn't read?
Hang on a second, Thank you. Well, these came in after, so you want to just, you want to take a minute and,
Chelsea and Jupiter, I support having freedoms on our property. Kevin, crossed out your name and address. And Brad Williams, please leave Loxahatchee alone. We are not criminals. We are people who own property and to be free without infringing on others to use our property the way we want. Pia Scorin, not in favor of expanding trucks in the acreage. Trucks are not compatible with our agricultural, residential lifestyle. Please create a county lot for our truck neighbors on a county or state road. Thank you. Elizabeth Accomando, there's no comment. Claire Dougal, we would like the board to amend code, add new code, and work with the residents. We need to continue to earn a living and take our, I can't read it, I apologize. Anthony Dougal, need new code for residents, farms, trucks to keep our livelihood, who support our families. We are law-abiding citizens, taxpayers. Antonia, we need help, please. Small minority-owned businesses are hurting. Those are the cards.
thank you. All right. So bringing this back, I think it might be beneficial, easier for us to find out, I think there may be some areas of agreement and let me just say, so my understanding is,
I wanted to ask you a question. We have an elected from ITID here. That was one of the cards I wanted to speak. I didn't know if you wanted to give a courtesy.
okay, there's somebody here from ITID, I'm sorry. And thank you, Commissioner Baxter, for letting me know. Who's here from ITID? Okay. Yeah, we took her card. As a courtesy to you, Ms. Accomando, I will allow you 2 minutes to speak.
That's not right.
Since we did receive a letter from, I believe, your board in regards to the concern about the roads.
That's correct. Elizabeth Accomando, 6521 Carroll Street, Loxahatchee. Actually, I was going to stand before you today to speak on the record as a resident, not as an official from the district. The district has its opinion, as you just noted. However, as a resident, I have my own personal feelings, so I don't know if you will afford me the moment to discuss that.
It's going right now.
Okay. I am so grateful to the commission and staff for hearing this. What I've witnessed in the 10 years that I've been out in our community is, yes, a lot of change, some brought on by COVID, some prior. COVID also brought us a lot of online shopping, which means more trucks on the road. Amazon, we pull them out of our road on a constant basis. However, the changes or enforcement, which was, I would say, not enforced previously for 20 years, has created gentrification in our community. And it's changed so much, and it's forced people to move out because their livelihood would not allow them to come into compliance. I would like to see a reasonable solution which assists both sides and done through the county with proper permitting so that people will continue to keep their property rights and our very unique and lovely community that we have, people will stop moving out and work together with our neighbors who are in these new cities and new plan unit developments that are popping up alongside of us to work together in a mutual understanding that everyone, including the residents of the acreage, have property rights. So thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. All right. So my understanding from is what we can do is we can certainly do nothing, and this was all and it was very informative. We can ask that staff go back and look at different things, or we can give staff direction on what to look at. So those are really the directions we can do today. So excuse me, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Okay, I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't have a conversation. I'm sorry. I think, okay, first off, it's not appropriate to be yelling out in a meeting. Okay. I understand that, but this is an informational hearing for us, and to try and provide a lot of latitude for folks. But this is really was for staff to bring us information. It wasn't even about a vote, a public hearing on a change to an ordinance or anything like that. It was them, at our request, bringing back information to us that we requested, and as a courtesy, allowed folks to speak today because you all were here. So I think we're aware of the Indian. We all have the letter from Indian Trails. We are aware of what their board's position is on this. So we don't need to say, I don't need to, ma'am, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. It's a public record. Well, you can request it through public records request, and we'll make that available to you. So staff can certainly make that available. All right. So that maybe the easiest way to, and I think there were some things that were brought up in the discussion that probably there's, I would think maybe consensus on, that we might be able to give direction to. So maybe let's start with that. As they say, start with the easy stuff first. And do you have another comment, Commissioner Baxter, before you do that?
Oh, I guess we were following up on what I had started before comments had ended.
Okay, you're good right now.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I think, and if I missed something, please let me know. Okay, so on the issue of the fence heights, and staff brought this up, we have a minimum or maximum fence sizes. Does anyone have a problem with them going out and doing some work and bringing back some recommendations into changing that? So we're good on giving staff direction on that. Okay. Same thing with on the hedges. Is there any disagreement on having them look at hedges for us? Okay. Yes.
No disagreement, but I would love if they could include Calusa plants, because right now they're only allowing Arecas, and Calusas are a lot more visually nice.
Well, we'll see how well. We thought the ficuses would do well too, and we saw how that worked out, and now everybody has Calusas, and so we'll see when the next thing that hits them and how we all do with that. Okay, Commissioner Baxter again?
Oh, sorry, I just didn't.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's that. On the hobby horse farms, do we have in the hobby farms, are there things that, I know Commissioner Sachs, does anybody have a problem with, do we have any limitations or in the AR with hobby farms or?
They're allowed, but the issue comes into the accessory structures. Different zoning districts have different accessory structure setbacks, and a lot of places with an agricultural population. For hobbyists, they have different setbacks for livestock housing. And I'm not talking the commercial ones, they're already going to be exempt. But, you know, we hear a lot of feedback about building permits for chicken coops or the goat shed or those kind of things. So it could benefit from accessory structure examination. They can have the livestock, but our code doesn't say anything about special rules for the housing. So I think that's worth looking at.
Okay. Does anyone have a problem with that? Okay. So we're good on that. All right. Okay, on commercial vehicles. So let's start. Let's start with the recreational vehicles. Well, let me go back. You made a recommendation or asked for consideration on doing something similar to what Miami-Dade does, where they have, instead of having the weight classifications per se, they have their 3 classifications. That, if I got that correct. Was that?
Yes, that's for the commercial vehicles. For the recreational vehicles, I think the big thing is, do we want to go back to what the code said before for the AR rural flues with, you know, before they were able to have 7 recreational vehicles, and that would take some work with code enforcement, but now there are 3 and they have to be screened. And, you know, the screening requirement, if you're on 1.5 acres, 2 acres, 3 acres, and you're having to screen in your boat and your RV, I think a lot of folks aren't actually doing that yet because, you know, but the one size fits all in the recreational vehicles, I think is worthy of looking at, separate from the categories for the commercial vehicles.
Okay, and Commissioner Marino and then Commissioner Baxter.
What preempted the change to go from the 7 to the 3? Because this is, to change our code is a long, drawn-out process. So what brought that on? Because none of us were here.
So in the 2019, in discussions with the county attorney at the time and the former code enforcement director and the vehicle issues they were having at the time, the decision was to do this change and the other change at the same time. And what led to, Rick might know more than me on what led the RVs to change, but other than it was tidying up and they were, you know, too many maybe trailers or something, or confusion about commercial vehicles. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't been able to document exactly why this change on the screen was proposed.
And then really, what is the definition of a commercial vehicle and what is the definition of a recreational vehicle?
The recreational vehicles are the personal vehicle use, but I think what could use some work is the trailers for the rec vehicles. Some other local governments have better descriptions. So for example, those ATVs, you know, those little 3-wheel or 4-wheel things, you might not have a custom trailer for that, but you have a trailer for that, and you might use that trailer for work things as well. And I think our code isn't very specific, and it could use a little housekeeping on that, because it just says kind of trailers there, and of course the boat trailer, you can tell it looks different, but you know, I don't think our code is as specific as some of the other local governments we've looked at with the toys. And they don't even have a really good name. You know, there's those big things with big wheels that I think you drive them off your property too. What do they call them? Mud buggies? I don't know. There we go. Swamp buggies. So I think that could use a little housekeeping. Our terms right there are a little generic, and trailers. And I think it was folded into that bundle with the commercial trailers versus the rec trailers. Unless Rick wants to add anything.
Well, I think before we revert back to where we were, I think we need to clean this up better and get some better definitions. But we've said that before. I mean, when we have definitions in 4 different places in our code, it's hard for folks to figure out what needs to be done. So I think we need a whole lot more clarity. Before we go changing anything, I think we need clarity.
So I think we can work on some ideas for the recreational vehicles and come back. One thing that we were thinking about is framing any direction today in 2 agendas from now so that we could publish it. So I think we could work on coming up for ideas for defining what those personal trailers are versus the commercial trailers and the boats versus the RVs and coming up with some ideas. Because the words to revert back to weren't that good to begin with.
And I think we need better definitions on what commercial vehicles are, because none of us up here want to put any businesses out of business. I mean, you have an electrician who probably has a commercial vehicle because he works for an electrical contractor. I don't see a problem with that. But I do see a problem if somebody has an electrical business and they have 10 people coming to their house with their personal vehicles, getting the electric vehicle, the commercial vehicle that is for the electric business, and then driving it out and then coming back again, and those 10 people then getting back. So I have a problem with that. That's running a commercial business that is more than what is allowed. And I do see that, I think there was a question about boat storage, just from, and I know you all hear me talk about Palm Beach Gardens, but it's where I come from. We did have, you were not allowed to have a boat on your driveway. It had to be parked on the side of a house, and it had to be screened. So I think most municipalities have something of that nature where it has to be out of the driveway, behind a fence and screened. So that's just helpful information, I'm hoping. But I think there's probably more to be had, and I'm sure everybody else wants to jump in on this, so I thank you for your attention.
Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
Thank you. On that briefly, and I agree, if you live, like even in Royal Palm where they do allow it in driveways or in gardens, it's probably fairly easy to add a little piece of concrete to the side of the house and pull it behind a fence and so on and so forth. But I think it gets overlooked that in the acreage, our driveways are extremely long, and we are not on, most of us are on well water. So where most people would be able to pull their boat to the side and behind a fence and properly, I guess, do it the way we would imagine, we are restricted on, a lot of homes are, because of, the equipment that it takes just to get your house water. I know in my house, we have it right there. So and then the cost, right? Concrete, asphalt, whatever you want to say. We have extremely long driveways. So that's what my concern is really with the one size fits all. But I do agree with the commissioner on certain types of properties. I just don't think that would be cost effective. And I mean, I don't mind hearing back from you, Commissioner, if you think that would still be a requirement or should be, or how you feel on that. Lastly, when it comes to, the code, I was going to ask you, that's what my question was originally for. When we deleted everything, is there any limit right now on actual personal vehicles? Because I think there's not. Is there not?
So toys like ATVs, side-by-sides, that's not something we look at.
Okay.
We look at licensed, things that need to be licensed, trailers, boats, cars, things like that. As long as they're operable and licensed, that's what we typically look for.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it properly as well. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, you recognize.
I'd like to propose, and I'm looking at Commissioner Baxter, I'd like to propose that maybe you have an advisory committee to help you, advise you on what the people want, especially with regard to recreational vehicles in their area, so that our staff knows specifically what the people want in that area. Nobody knows better what you want than the people who live there. And I think that that would be very helpful, and it certainly would be a great connection between government and the people and the residents. We're talking about county land, we're not talking about cities. So the issue with the driveways and things like that, I think it would be very helpful to have the draft sent to an advisory committee if you want, and then that way you can transmit that directly to our staff so that we get a code that's livable and workable and really congruent with what the people want today. A couple of years, those toys may be bigger and more powerful. Who knows what's going to be happening? But right now, we need a livable code that is consistent with what the folks want in their homes. and in their neighborhoods. So just a suggestion for you if you want to. Yeah.
Commissioner Marino, you're recognized.
I think what keeps going around in my head is that we need definition clarity. Because what you just described with recreational vehicles was not what I thought of when recreational vehicles were being discussed. So your clarification of it has to have a license, registration, three-wheel drives, a lot of those don't. So that is clarification that I didn't know, so I thank you for that. But I think going forward, we really do need, it's about the definitions. People look at the definitions. If they see a different definition in Chapter 1 than they see in Chapter 4, how do they know what to deal with? So I think if we could really clarify the definition of what a commercial vehicle is, what a recreational vehicle is, I think we would be making the right step forward in whatever we do in the future. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think that, just for my, if you all have comments, I want to allow you to go ahead and make them, so go ahead. Commissioner Woodward?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say I appreciate, as the mayor mentioned, looking at Miami-Dade's definitions, and I'm sure there's other counties who have already had to deal with this more than we have, and I know there's some more rural counties that perhaps have some of this definition, because Palm Beach County is very much from urban all the way to rural and everything in between. So if we could find some of that, so you guys aren't having to necessarily, invent the wheel here. And I think that for us, because we are facing a lot of those issues that are big county, small county, all in one county. So I that would just be my suggestion looking forward, if you could bring back and let us know what other counties have done already. So that would be it for me.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Barnett, do you have any comments? Oh, okay. So I tend to align with Commissioner Marino in sort of the way to look at this. I think that, I think there's probably some things we need to be considering as it relates to the commercial vehicles for the businesses. I will say I am not supportive of the semi-trucks. That's not something that I would consider as being an appropriate place to put that on a residential property with neighbors and so forth. But I would think that coming up with a solution for those, because they are an important part of our economy, but I think there might be other solutions available to find secure parking nearby. And I'd like to, if there's anything like that you can explore and bring back to us, I think that would be useful, because it would be something I would certainly support. And Commissioner Woodward's comments in regards to the looking at the other counties, I think that's a great idea as well. I know FAC probably might be a great resource as well on this. They may have some work done. And those are really my comments on it. I think the definition of the recreational vehicles, I think, what those are and so forth. I think you've identified a lot of areas, so I would be supportive of those. So, and Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
I guess now that we've had two different opinions, then how do we handle going forward as far as direction goes?
Well, so I think and it may be the difference of opinion may be on the semi-trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about that. So maybe ask the board at this point, if any, and I'll do this. I'll just ask the board if there is the appetite to want to have staff go work on something in regards to semi-trucks parking in the AR. How about that? Is there any?
Well, can we start left to right maybe? And
I don't know that I have to poll them. I can just
Okay.
ask the question, and if
no.
they have an opinion about it, if that's something they want to consider. I'd be happy to. The question is, would you like to have direct staff to bring back something in regards to allowing semi-trucks to be parked out in the AR? Okay. No, well, you're saying, you said yes?
Yes.
Yes. No from Commissioner Marino?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes from, okay, so they'll bring it back. Okay.
That's it.
Do you have anything else? All right. Moving on to our agenda.
Mayor, if I could, one point, just to set the expectation for the board and then and clarify the point. Heard your direction on RV, heard your direction just now on the larger vehicle ones. I'm going to call them the mid-sized ones, and mindful of Commissioner Woodward's note, and Lisa brought up the Miami-Dade example by way of structure. Certainly not to copy it exactly, but did the board have any direction on, I'm going to call it the mid-sized ones, the commercial vehicles? Tow trucks, we talked about recreational vehicle, we talked about 18-wheelers. We can come back with thoughts as it addresses those points as well.
I thought we were clear on that.
Okay.
Clear on what?
Let me ask staff. Were we clear on that? Or
I
no?
think coming back, I'll have to, the 12.5 doesn't fit those vehicles you've seen on the screen, so I think when we came back with semi-truck ideas, we would propose probably the mid-side. I think we need to put that out there. Because those don't fit in our commercial vehicle now, but they're personal vehicles. So I think if it's okay with the board, we've heard a couple times about looking at the categories of Miami, and Miami does 3 categories. They have the under, the little ones, the medium ones, and then the big ones. So I think
All right. Commissioner Marino asked me to ask this question. When you said semi-trucks, does that also include tractor trailers? So that would mean the truck and the trailer. So.
I would say from staff perspective, we would look to the maximum and begin to address it that way, and then you'll talk to the board, but we'll give you the maximum
enough.
impact
Okay.
to have that discussion.
All right. All right.
Can I amend my comment?
Go right ahead.
Okay. If the board wants to continue discussions about semi-tractors, I'm fine with that. I am opposed to tractor trailers. We do have a 26-foot maximum in our code right now. So I think that's there for a reason. We want to talk about semi-tractor. So are we talking about the cabs themselves then? Is that what we're talking about?
Well,
I guess this is where we need clarification, and is that a commercial vehicle? So
This is the part of the conversation when we come back, if we can define some of what these categories are, because what we saw in our research is that, even driving out to the night meeting out at the Seminole High School, I saw a semi-truck, but without the trailer. Lovely burgundy metallic thing tucked in somebody's yard, easily navigating around a little corner, versus the dump truck or the trailer that's so large, they're parked along the swale because they don't fit in. I think when we come back, we would try to fit things into little boxes and categories better than we've been able to do so far. But definitely, it seems like there was differences of opinion on some of the phone calls I got. The front cab with the really expensive parts versus the trailer part, and then the weight as well as the material, because an enclosed trailer doesn't, the weights can vary radically. The front part is different from the back. But
all right, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Baxter, then Vice Mayor.
So are we then, I guess, looking at, then they would have to find a place to store the trailer part of it?
For between now and when we come back, which I'm looking at Patrick Rutter would hopefully be in 2 months to give us a little time, we would just frame out the different categories a little better and then leave it up to the board to decide what they chose to do.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor, you recognize.
I just want to point out that the FDOT has all these commercial vehicles all in nice little boxes because they regulate the weight on our state roads. And our tax collector will give you a commercial vehicle license if you actually operate commercial vehicles. And the same thing with license plates. So all this is standard for the state of Florida. So we don't need to get, too much into the weeds. This has all been taken care of. And since we're a county, whatever regulations we have, the state's already put it down into the weight and things like that. So we want to make it consistent with the FDOT for the entire state of Florida, and we will be consistent with that. And they have the weight of the trailers, the weight of different vehicles up there. So it's good. It's good. And I look forward to your work on it. Thank you. You already know a lot about trucks and how cool they look, and I like them too. So they'll be right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Moving on, we are now at the end of our regular agenda. We are moving on to county attorney's comments.
None.
Zoning director,
No comments?
planning director.
He's on his way, well, Brian's on his way up.
Oh,
He is going to have a comment, but were we going to talk about the pre-application meetings, or did that happen? I lost
That's
my agenda.
that's under executive
Oh,
director.
I lost that. Brian's going to have something under, or no, he's not. He's just coming up here to sit.
Yeah, I think that's going to come up under commissioner comments.
All right. All right. Where are we at? It's 12:30 now.
Yes. Thank you.
How much more do we have?
Just this?
What do we have? Do you have any estimate on? What do you got?
We can proceed past this.
Okay.
Wait.
Prepared to answer any question, excuse me, related to Commissioner Baxter's memo that she sent out the other day related to heritage. That's why Brian's here. If we needed to. Otherwise, the only piece we have left is PZB director. Just wanted to talk about expedited pre-application processes. If the board wanted to have that discussion next month, we could do that too. I don't think it's going to be that long. Just wanted to update you on work that's been done.
In the backup, so if you wanted to read through that, and that's just a foundation to get you started for the conversation if you wanted us to explore anything else. I know you get calls from constituents asking about mandatory pre-apps, things like that, to help them through the process a little bit better. So we want to lay the foundation for you and see if there's any comments on that.
So.
How much time?
How much, do we have any? I'm just trying to make decision on whether we need to take a break now for lunch
No,
and then
that
come back.
If you don't have any comments on it now or want to discuss it at this point, you can email me individually. We can discuss it individually. Can get your comments that way, or we can discuss it.
You asked for it? Okay.
I asked for this a bit ago, and that's why this is here. I just wanted, because we've heard from the community that, they're zoning, getting permits and stuff takes a long time. So I had asked for if there was a possibility of having a mandatory pre-application meeting so that new developers in the community would actually have the ability to see all of our departments together, and that's why I brought this up. So I know this is not a very long presentation, and just give us a little background about what the normal process is right now. Are there any mandatory procedures in place right now? Is there something that we can do in the future to maybe say, if you've only been in business in the county for a year, please do a pre-application, meeting, something of that nature. So I think that's what you were going to touch on, correct?
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
So if you could go ahead and do that, I'd appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Okay. So currently at PCB, we do something with the. Currently at PCB, we do a mandatory, well, it's not a mandatory pre-app. We have the BDB projects that come to us. Usually those are people that are new to the area. So we, as a courtesy, provide a pre-application meeting with them, with many of the agencies that we work with throughout the development process. So They come to us, we facilitate that, and it's usually a very successful meeting. It's voluntary, though. And then throughout the other departments, planning, any kind of land use amendment application that comes to the planning division requires a pre-application meeting. The planning division also works with the zoning division, and they do DRO approvals, which ultimately, some of those ultimately end up at the public hearing process. Those require a pre-application meeting. General applications in the zoning division, in the zoning division, like DRO, administrative type approvals, those don't necessarily require them. Some variances require the pre-application meeting, and some waivers or some variances do not. So, but we encourage people to meet with us if they would like to. We don't have anything that's on the books necessarily for right now as far as new people coming to the area, and but we have talked about that and maybe doing like an orientation for those that are new to the area, new agents to the area, new contractors, things like that. There's in the zoning division, we also work with the building division, who has they do a lot of the permits route to the zoning division. Comments are made on those that ultimately sometimes end up in a ZAR process, which is an administrative site plan amendment. Those people might not be as familiar with the site plan amendment process as agents that are typically, doing those types of things. So they might require more hand-holding or more orientation on what the process looks like. So we're working on that as far as communicating better to the development industry on the opportunities to meet with us and those types of things. We can't require those. We feel because our volume is so substantial that requiring a pre-application meeting for every application would be very cumbersome. That leads me to the building division, which we take in about 300 applications a day. And that would be very cumbersome on every application to require something like that. But the larger projects are identified typically after sufficiency. And if they are of a large scale, then the building division will call together a required mandatory pre-app and mandatory inspection meetings. So, so there are ways that we're working to require them just because we do see the value in doing that. But of course, the quality that we get is the quality that we can work with to move it forward. So we would like to have quality applications at the onset. So those pre-application meetings are important. But sometimes, we see between the pre-application meeting and then what is submitted may be different. So, so that's just kind of where we're at with it right now. And maybe we can look into doing more of those new people to the area type orientations, things like that. So, but we welcome any comments or suggestions you all have that you are hearing from your constituents that you think would be better for us.
The common thing that I hear is just the speed at which the process takes, or I should say the snail speed at which the process takes. So if there's anything we can do, and we as a board don't know your jobs. So we can't say, do this, 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 and this. You're the ones that can say, well, to be more efficient, we can do this. And that's what that's what I'm looking for as a commissioner is, what can you look at and say, you know what, this really is not efficient. We can change it by doing X, Y, and Z. Because we're not the experts, you are. So all I can say is, it's a common theme from lots of people that email my office is the speed in which. So if there's something we can do to speed up that, ironically, speed up, that would be fabulous. So that was why I asked, because I do know that, if you have all of the different divisions in the room all at once, there's no he said, because everybody's in the room all at the same time. That was why I had asked about the pre-application meeting. Because it takes a long time when code says one thing, zoning says another, and a building says another, and it's all on the same topic. So that was my impetus for asking.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's
Makes sense?
true. And you're definitely you're on target with that because we are definitely looking at that. I think the DRO process they're looking at making maybe bringing it back to in-person where those agencies can be more at the table. The agents can have more of a dialogue type of discussion when their applications are being reviewed. Building division, there might be something we can look at there to help with that. But the more time we take away from the permit review process, and inspection process, the more it impacts our review time. So we have to be cognizant of that. But I think more education to the public is also going to be imperative. We just recently have a public information officer that we brought on board to help with some of our messaging and, some of our announcements that we can put out there, some videos, things like that may help with educating the public a little better.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Baxter, you recognize.
I was just going to say I completely agree. I mean, I've been talking with them about the same thing and trying to expedite that process, trying to help our residents navigate what is a complicated system before they even get started. And I even took it one step further, just so you know, and asked, because the DRO process for some people is very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I even asked if there was a way we could even help them with, maybe if at the end they're going to have to face a waiver that comes before us, maybe do that first before they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But yeah, I love the idea, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Okay. All right. So we'll go, I think we are now to commissioner comments. All right. So let's, and since Commissioner Baxter has written a letter about something she would like to discuss, why don't we start with you, Commissioner Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. So I did give you a lot of information in the memo, and even an image that they've nicely posted up there. And we had, a lot of people at a certain point really dislike the overlay, and we found that a majority of it, or land acreage-wise, was what you are looking at now with the properties in red. We're really against it. So I was asking if before we start going back and forth about even approving the overlay, hoping this would help a lot of residents and maybe make it a little more simple coming up, if we could exclude the area just south of the yellow line from the overall overlay, and I believe it's Park, I forget the name of the road, and then east of, it's in the memo, I believe it's Park Lane.
Yeah, east of Park Lane was what the memo had said. So Commissioners, just to remind you, this was before you back at the February comp plan hearing. The item was postponed to August, and so the direction had been to go back to continue to work and to also to the residents to come back and try and reach more consensus. So it's an item that's going to come back to you. This is certainly an option we can bring back, or to look at sort of two options of the overlay, somewhat more the way that Pioneer Road finished up. If you recall that process, where there was sort of one area that was studied and there was a different area that actually wound up being the overlay in the end. That's something like that. But it certainly does address the area where you have dissent, if you will, towards the overlay being established. But also you have the initiated amendments for the E properties and the others that were discussed that are coming in, that are in that area that's proposed by the commissioner to be cut out. So. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just remind me, when we postponed this, it's coming back in August, and
August 30th.
What was the direction for it coming back?
It was to, I think it was to both the staff and to the residents to try and work together to come up with a consensus, or to see if we could get better response to because there had been a mail out. It was trying to get some better understanding, and so at the same time we also have the other area that's in the overlay that's coming forward. So we're working through it. This would be a direction that we could then take and follow, or bring back as an option for the board's consideration in August.
Okay. I admit that I'm not overly familiar with this area. I have driven through it a couple of times, but something that was recently brought to my attention about this was in the overlay language, some of the properties that are in here wouldn't qualify for the future, right? Because they're smaller lots that I forget exactly how. I need a refresher on this one. But the smaller lots, especially the ones all the way south on, I believe, Barn Road, and then there's some others, but that whole bottom section, they're very small lots, and they wouldn't qualify for this to be in the, what's part of the future overlay. Is that correct?
By their future land use, they don't meet it, but some of those have been determined. This is really down in the weeds level answer I'm giving you. So, some of those, they have been or have to go through on an individual basis to determine if they're a legal lot and have vested rights. Some do not. So they may have to combine if they want to do anything other than a single-family residential. Those are handled on a case-by-case. It's one of the areas we spend a lot of time behind the scenes trying to figure out, are they individual lots? They may look like lots. The overlay I think is proposed doesn't do a lot for them. It was trying to say that this is an area should be stable and not look to change as some of the other areas in Heritage Farms has done. So the idea was, as a rural lot, you're supposed to be able to develop residentially if you can meet the adequate standards for development. It's just, do they meet the standards for exemption because they're too small under the current rules? So that's the vesting concept that's in land use and zoning, if you will.
Okay, I believe the question that was posed to me was, if they wouldn't qualify in the way you're talking about, but they're getting an equal vote in the heritage overlay. That was how I didn't have a good answer, because if they're getting an equal vote, but in order for this overlay to come into place, then they would not actually qualify as an equal.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that. That's why also in the information that was in the backup, we looked at it both on an overall acreage level. If you looked at it as overall, so when you're looking at the parcel size, one parcel owner, one owner shows up as a very big area of land, so it's the big map or big square on the map, but it's one owner, but you could get a lot of green that are very small. So we present the info in both ways for the board, to make the evaluations, which is the better way or the appropriate way. We're just presenting the information to you. And so sometimes it breaks on parcel size or owner, in that one, it was very much that if you looked at it on ownership, it was more green, if just in tallies, and then if you look at it on land area, it was more red because it was the larger parcels were looking that way. So that was in the backup back then. You don't have it in front of you now to look at, but that was how it was presented, and we were aware of that.
Well, I would just like to say I'm very much paying attention to this and digging into it more, and more people are starting to discuss it, I guess, as it's coming to August. I don't think I would recommend us removing anything now as far as like changing the map that it is, but I do think that that's stuff that we need to consider when this comes back, that there are smaller parcels that are having equal votes to larger parcels, and how do we actually weigh the proper balance for that? It's something I'm very cognizant of, because, like we said, that we had two very different tallies, one with numbers of parcels and then one with acreage, and that's, I believe we should be looking at that. And just to clarify, is the parcel that got exempted part of this now, or no?
No, the trotting center is the part that's notched out at the bottom. It's not in it.
It's
So
already removed.
yeah, it's
Okay.
the one that has no color. And then just to clarify the image that's on the screen, that yellow line is the Heritage Farms Road, and then where it ends, that's where Park Lane then goes north-south, and so it's the area that would be east of that line. So that piece that's underneath that, if you will, is the area that.
Well, so,
I'm
right.
just saying the part west of it is not in agreement with this either, so it's like there's an entire section there that does not want to be a part of this, and then north and south of it does. So that's.
Well, this was just trying to help exclude the most amount of red without affecting, because until we get clarification if the smaller parcels are actually going to be able to take advantage of this overlay, that's why when we did the Park Lane line instead of all the way to the end, and thought that might just help with some clarification and being able to just help the most amount of people, because I do hear them. And if a lot of them, after we exclude that and then take a whole new number, still just do or don't want it, it'll help us, I think, with the residents overall.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that this is coming back to us in August, and as we went through this with Pioneer Road, we started out with the, you know, the entire area, and then as we brought this forward and worked on it, we at the hearing we cut out the properties up on Jog Road. So I think and I appreciate you bringing this forward, but I think it's just, for me, it's premature. We're going to have a hearing on it in August, and and there'll be plenty of time. Everybody can be here. All the property owners will be noticed, and you know, we can make a decision whether we even move forward with the overlay or not, and then what the boundaries of the overlay might be. That's just my opinion on it, since we're going to have another hearing on it. So I think it's just a little premature right now. All right. I don't know. And Commissioner Baxter, you recognize.
So, yes, this is my district, and I was trying to find a way to get to a point where I would feel comfortable in August voting in favor of what most of the residents want. But if this is not excluded today, then it basically is predetermining my decision then.
Okay. All right. I don't see anybody else, any comments, so, and I don't see consensus to give direction staff at this point. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to Commissioner Marino comments.
For once, I have none.
Okay. Commissioner Woodward comments.
None.
Commissioner Barnett comments.
No comments.
Vice Mayor comments.
Let's eat.
Okay. That's
I
fine.
second that.
I have one comment, and that is I am appointing Varissa Laldas to the Planning Commission to fill one of my seats. Okay. All right. I see nothing else on our agenda. I appreciate all of staff's time and effort. I thought the work that was done, especially on the code enforcement and updating, giving us a good education and understanding. I don't want to end the meeting without noticing the great work that went on by staff. So thank you all, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh.
Very good.